stars be with you.
All right. I am so happy to welcome back to the program here today. We have Spencer Michaud with us here again. Thanks for joining me, Spencer.
Hey Mel, how you doing? Great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, we got two cancers in the house for cancer season. You know, it's got I thought of who would be the perfect person to talk about cancer season with. And it's actually been Spencer, you haven't been Spencer joined me with Shu when we did the Venus retrograde episode back in like late November of 2021, somewhere around then. But I think the last time we did an actual forecast on my podcast was actually a Capricorn solstice season back in 2020. I think that was the one.
Yeah, that was a big one, wasn't it?
That was a big one. So we had to even it out.
Yeah, that was the big Saturn Jupiter conjunction in Aquarius, right? That's what we were looking at around then.
That was what we were looking at. There was all types of things going on. And so we're back again for another solstice, a different solstice, a summer solstice here in the Northern Hemisphere. But just in case you are new to the program or new to Spencer, before we get started, Spencer, share a little bit about yourself.
I'm a professional astrologer based out of Ypsilanti, Michigan. And I have a YouTube channel, Spencer Michaud Astrology, that I've been doing live streams and teaching webinars and lectures on. And I'm inspired by Hellenistic astrology, but also mythopoetic astrologers like Liz Green and some of the fixed star work of like Bernadette Brady and things like that. I'm a graduate of the Nightlight astrology programs and all of that juice from that interesting branch of astrological education. And I just love astrology. I've been doing it for in one form or another for about 20 years now. but professionally for I don't know, the last few. I was a professional musician for a long time, and just really someone gifted me Dimitri George's Astrology and the Authentic Self, and that sent me on down the rabbit hole of traditional astrology, and I haven't looked back since.
That's what happens. It sucks you in, and it is a lifelong journey. But we're glad it sucked you in, Spencer, because you have been contributing some wonderful things to the astrological community. So definitely go check Spencer's YouTube channel out, because I've been on there a couple of times myself, but you're showing up at least a couple times a month, sometimes if not more, to have guests, a lot of reputable guests on with bright ideas, talking about all types of things. So you're definitely going to want to check out his YouTube channel. You're also going to want to check out, you probably heard if you listen to me, which I guess you are if you are here today, but I've been touting Spencer's sign series that he's been doing for 10 months now. And so you have another one coming up here, correct, for Cancer?
Yeah, I've got I call it integrative divination, the decans of Cancer. So it's a really deep dive into each of the sign images through the lens of the decans. We combine tarot, we combine each 10-degree section of a sign. I go through the mythological significance of each sign. It's really a lot of fun. I put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into it, and we have really nice discussions. So I'm really looking forward to that. The next one's going to be on July the 16th, Saturday at 1 p.m. Eastern time. So I'm looking forward to doing that, and hope people will join me.
Yes. So go, we'll have a link to Spencer's workshop in the description of this podcast. And of course, if you're a listener of the podcast and you put in the code EP20, you can get 20% off of the workshop or the bundle, because you do bundle them together, right, Spencer, for each season?
Yeah,
or not season/season, 3 seasons in 1 season.
I've got the summer bundle coming up here with Cancer, Leo, and Virgo, so the signs of summer. I'm going to be doing Cancer and Leo live, and then Virgo was actually the Decan webinar that I started with those many 10 months ago, it feels like now. But I'm going to be doing that, sending that off as a recorded session from that first one that we did together. So I'd love to have all of you for the series, and And you can find previous webinars too. If you missed them, you can find them on the store on my website, spencermichaud.com.
Yeah, it is a rich body of work. And so if you want to do a deep dive into the signs from so many angles, you're going to want to go check Spencer out. So, all right. Well, speaking of Cancer, we're going to be talking all things Cancer. Well, kind of all things Cancer, but it is
Sure.
Cancer solstice season, just around the corner here. I think this is actually going to release a day before the solstice, which happens on Tuesday, January, wrong month, June. Like, what J am I in? June 21st, which I actually have it wrong in my notes now. I'm looking at it. So I had 22nd. I wanted it to be a day later. I'm like, can you hold off? Astrology moves so fast lately. Like, the planets are in a whirl. I'm like, where are we at?
It's
I don't
endless.
know.
Infinite.
It is infinite. It is infinite. All right. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen here if you're watching the video. But let us talk a little bit about just solstice in general, because it is a special time of year. We have these, we think about the year and tropical astrology really being divided into these pivot points of quarters where we have 2 solstices and 2 equinoxes. But Spencer, when I say solstice, and especially summer solstice, because I know a lot of us here are listening in the Northern Hemisphere, what does that bring up for you?
Yeah, it's a really fascinating time of year. It's the point where the sun is at its highest declination, or its highest point that it rises in the sky at noon. So we've got this solar journey that we see through different parts of astrology, different times of year. And here we've got the solar power that is at its height. And then the sun reverses direction right at that summer solstice and starts to rise slightly lower in the sky each day. So we're seeing the ascension of the powers of the night start to return. And we've got the house of the moon here with Cancer. And one of the really interesting things about the summer solstice that I've come across in my research, in my last Gemini Decans webinar and into Cancer here, is the Egyptian philosophy that Cancer was the first sign, really, instead of the 4th sign, right? So we have Cancer on the ascendant of the Thema Mundi, which was related to the returning of the fertility to the Nile River Valley. And that to me is just very fascinating. Think of it as a union of body and soul, and infusing us with a new sense of purpose and things of that nature. So it's a really hopeful, inspiring time, I think. I think it's, in the Northern Hemisphere, it's a time of abundance. So I'm excited for it.
Yeah, me too. It's interesting because when we think about Cancer being the first sign of the zodiac, in very traditional speak, back then, it really makes a lot of sense. I mean, they both do, having Aries as its own spark of something, right? When you think about fire and that just initial flame and start and inspiration and kind of spiritual motivation behind things. And then water follows it up. And we know, what is the thing we think of most with Cancer a lot of times is this mother energy, this birth, right? This creation, this void that, brings forth life. And so they're both births, but in different ways. But
I think
I
that
feel
one thing
ahead.
you can think about with Cancer is that it is a creature of the borders between land and the sea.
That's right.
And that ocean being that primordial sea of the collective unconscious, of the oneness of the spirit world on some level. So, life was begat from those oceans. And I think that we're seeing that with think about it as the amniotic sea of fluid that a baby grows in too, right? So we're coming from that oceanic consciousness, just even inside our mothers in those meta cycles as well.
Yeah, that the womb, the the oceanic womb that nurtures us all. And we think about, life in general, like we think about as far as human beings and how we are derived from the sea in some way. We think about being ancestors of fish-like species that have, like literally the Cancer was the first to crawl up on the shore, and they're like, oh, what's this?
Well,
Let's
don't we sort
bridge
of
this
have
gap.
Don't we sort of have gills for a little while when we're
Yeah, we had
in the womb,
some
right?
gills. We were
Yeah.
yeah, we do. We have
Yeah.
like little shark gills.
Nice.
Um when we start out there. So there's we're all sea creatures to some effect here. But it's also that just nourishment quality, like you said, with the Nile River coming into, because that is the lifeblood. That's the life of the people. It's, we all need water to survive. We're made up of what, like 65-70% water. So water is such a crucial point of life. And so cardinal energy, as the Cancer is kind of that rush and that start. And so when we think about water and cardinal water in general, what's kind of your image that comes up as far as, like, we like to liken water type bodies to signs. What what do you think Cancer is?
Like what kind of like image or symbol do I see with it, or?
Yeah, or like I guess for me, when I think of Cancer, I think of kind of like a wave coming at you,
Hmm.
or like, you know,
Yeah, I like yeah, I saw a really good image in one of the books that I was reading for research for this talk today, and it showed a crab in a tide pool, and I thought that
oh,
was really great. Like these little pockets of sheltered, fertile
mm,
water where it's just teeming with life, and it's sort of a mixture of that land and the sea and those primordial waters. I mean, we got to think about the moon a little bit here too, and the moon can pull those tides in and out, and we are fluctuating, we're ebbing and flowing with the current and whatnot. Can I read a quote for you, because this was something that I
yeah.
was like, because I was thinking about this, because we think of Cancer as this really, like, hard exterior, squishy inside. I believe one of our favorite authors, Susie Chang, says it's like the hard candy shell with the chewy caramel
So
center
the
type of
nougat
thing.
center.
Right. Yeah. So, but one of the things that I think is interesting, and I think you and I definitely feel this from our shared histories, being Cancers and growing up a certain way, is, the moon giveth and the moon taketh away. And this is a quote from Liz Green's book Mythic Astrology, which was a companion to her tarot deck that she did that was astrological. And she says, lunar compassion is not flowery, but is a ruthless force of nature through which an emerging life is protected and preserved. So
Mm,
I was like, oh yeah, because I think I felt that in certain moments too, this, like, protectiveness. And I'll tell you what imagery that came up to me. I've been thinking about, okay, who's the Cancerian archetypes in our collective?
yeah.
And the one that really stood out to me was Mike Tyson, the boxer,
Oh.
right? And he's a really polarizing figure. He was just a force of nature, they used to call him, basically, where he was just the most vicious, strong, un, undefeatable force. And he has this really interesting paradox of raising pigeons. Like he just has, like, literally hundreds, potentially even thousands of pet pigeons. And this began when he was a small child. And
Mm.
basically, like, somebody stole one of his pigeons that he was caring for and ripped its head off and, like, threw it at him. And so Liz Green talks about having Cancer being moved through trauma to actually get involved with life rather than retreating from it. And he said that
Mm.
was his first fight. That was the first time he actually got in a fight with someone, was because someone murdered one of his beloved pigeons. And I was
Something he
like,
cared for.
exactly. So
Yeah.
I think that kind of imagery is really, really powerful and potent for me with Cancer and whatnot as well.
Oh, that's interesting. Because you think about, yeah, Cancers. Oh, they're soft, they're cuddly, they're homebodies. Those things are true, but there is that protective nature, and there is a fighter inside of Cancer. Like crabs have claws. They are they are going
Absolutely.
to protect what is important to them and what they care for. And so much so sometimes the self and its own needs can be overlooked because we're trying to fight for things that we care about that are maybe outside of ourselves,
Yeah.
whether it's our children or our loved ones, or maybe even a cause that is is dear to your heart. And so cancers are formidable, like they're
Yeah, we can be.
and if you know one, one of the key words is tenacious, right? It's
Right.
like there's a tenacity to cancer, because at the end of the day it's a cardinal sign. And probably why I think of waves, I love tide pools. I think that works
Yeah.
so well too, just the life that teems there and how rich and diverse those little pockets of water are. um but yeah, just like the tides that go in and come out, there's just this force of movement and being, you ever got smacked in the face by a huge ass wave? Like,
Yes.
you don't forget, you don't forget
Yes.
that. Like there's a
It'll
moment
knock
you're
you
just
on.
like,
Yeah.
what? Yeah,
It'll knock you
exactly.
on your ass.
It will.
Like,
It'll
yeah.
knock you on your ass. It'll drag you
Yeah.
under. Like
Yep. It's
there
powerful.
there are characteristics to
Yeah.
Cancer energy that can do that. You think about like the idea of the mama bear or
Yeah.
papa bear or any bear that wants to care for something.
Right.
You do not mess with a mama bear and its cubs. Like it will be that force of the big ass wave that will take
Yep.
you down and scalp you.
Well,
No,
and that's definitely something to remember during this season, because a lot of times we just characterize this season, this sign, as like happy-go-lucky, like family stuff. But there may be some challenges around this season as well, with defending what is most important to you. I think like Cancer is all about protecting something so that it can grow to its full potential. And I think that I feel that very, very specifically with my daughter, and like with like my projects and things like that. It's like sometimes you have to shield something from the outside world so that it can grow into its full form.
I love that. Well, and it makes so much sense in relation to the actual Cancer ingress itself, with the amount of Aries that is, including the moon, which rules that Cancer sun, which is backing it. So the idea of fighting for something that your heart is invested in, or that you care for, is yeah, there's definitely a tenacious fighting energy that is part of this particular Cancer season, and just the way it starts off there.
Yeah, there's a lot of symbolism about how are we going to individuate, and how are we going to find our own personal sovereignty, and how that might be clashing with the people that we care about, the people that we identify with. I mean, that's one of the negative sides of Cancer, is a clannishism, right? Like like saying this is my family, and you are on the outside of this, and I'm going to protect this with a barrier. So there may be some challenges around that too. And the moon being related to the masses and the collective. I mean, this could be something where we have these collective emotions that get triggered, right? We've been dealing with a lot of gun violence this last season, and there may be some things that come to the fore regarding that, and legislation and things like that as well, where people are really having a lot of intense discussions about protecting children, protecting families, but also people are making arguments for their personal sovereignty as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And why Aries and Cancer square? That's the thing to think
Yeah.
about here is it's a very activating energy, but at the same time, it's in this square position, and we have a last quarter moon that is kicking off the solstice, and there is that turning of the corner and turning the page with tension and activation. And a lot of times with squares, it's like, I love what Bernadette Brady says, it's like with squares, it's nobody's fault, like, because
Yeah.
it can't be both. It has to be like just the way it is. It's just the way it is, even through tension and stress. And you kind of got to go one way or the other, and you can't have both. You have to
Yeah.
make a decision. So It'll be an intriguing season, to say the least, starting off on this foot, and especially in the 3 months that go with it. And there's, we got a dynamic new moon that we're going to be talking about in Cancer that's going to be square Jupiter, with Neptune happening to station at the same
Yeah,
exact time, which is interesting in itself. We have moon quarters that are all, including the full moon in Capricorn, and they're all going to be in cardinal signs. And when we have moon quarters in a cardinal sign, you can bet that we are in a cycle that is going to be starting, initiating, moving, pivoting, going somewhere.
absolutely.
Yeah. And so we also have Mercury gaining speed after, its whole retrograde journey that happened in Taurus and Gemini season. So it'll be going through Gemini, Cancer, and just a tail end of Leo. Venus will be in Gemini and Cancer herself. And of course, Mars is going to be finishing up Aries and switching into Taurus, which is a whole story in itself that's coming down the
Yeah.
pipeline.
Well, and it's interesting. We've got 4 planets, at the start of this cardinal water season in their own home signs or their own home domiciles, with Mercury in Gemini, Venus in Taurus, Mars in Aries, and then Saturn in Aquarius. I mean, that's a lot of planets having access to their own preferred resources, and I think that in general that is not necessarily a bad thing. But I think what it does is it gives a more pure expression to each individual planet. Mars is more Marsy, Saturn is more Saturny, and each of them is able to kind of carry out their agenda in the way that they see fit. So it's there can be some definite tension in regards to that, because like a strong Mars could bring a lot of separations, could bring a lot of anger, tension, violence. Strong Saturn could bring a lot of separations and feelings of loneliness or exile or responsibility. But on the other hand, Venus could really bring us some of the goodies in life, right? Like maybe easier than it would in a different place.
Yeah. And it's interesting because they're in their own signs, there's some configurations going on, but it leaves them for, I feel like there's different plot lines going on in
Sure.
different, it's like compartmentalizing different types of life into their own little pockets where, maybe I'm experiencing this nice Venusian pleasure, and I'm learning the things that I need to learn with Mercury, but I'm having this anger issue over here, and I'm feeling blocked or having some sort of like kind of Saturn issue or authority issue over here. And so it's just adding to the complexities of life, I suppose, and kind of branching it out in different ways, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so before we kind of break into our transits, let's just go back one more time and think about, because each season we're like, well, who becomes the focus? Like in Gemini season, it was Mercury doing its dance with being retrograde, and in Taurus and Gemini, and in Aries, it was Mars doing this thing. But Cancer season is always interesting because it's the moon.
Yeah.
She's all over the place.
That's true. Yeah, the moon's a timekeeper. One of the images I really like about the moon is thinking about it like the cylinder of a music box that has these little tines on it that strike the planetary keys. The moon moves very quickly. It changes very quickly every 3 days or so. It's on to a new issue, on to a new sign. So it also has the qualities of waxing and waning, where it gathers light and then it disseminates it out. And so there's these dueling themes of consumption and also nurturing. That's one of the things I like about the way, one of my favorite authors, Austin Coppock, describes Cancer and the moon is, to nurture something else needs to be consumed. And that gives you a lot to think about and a lot to meditate on, especially with this first decan of Cancer that we see here at the solstice, which is Venus ruled actually. And the first 10 degrees of Cancer has a Venusian quality to it, where we're feeling attracted to the things that we desire emotionally, like it's a relationship decan where we may feel really like falling in love with something. And what the transition from the last decan of Gemini to this one is really fascinating to me, because the last decan of Gemini is a hard one. That one's like, hey, you got too many plates spinning. It's time to make a choice. It's time to let go of some of these options, to infuse what's most important to you into a body and nurture it. So I think that I'm welcoming this transition, because I'm like, we've all felt overwhelmed. We're coming off this full moon as we record this, where everybody's just been going 100 miles an hour. And it's like, okay, maybe we'll finally get to like really focus on the one thing that we want to bring into fruition, rather than our attention being split in all these different directions. One real quick, there's a myth that I like from that transition from Gemini to Cancer. It's called the myth of and it's related to choosing lots before an incarnation into a body, where a soldier was given, a consciousness when he died, and said, here, these are the lots that you could choose from. And various people were choosing different lives. Somebody who had not experienced the challenges and the suffering of the earthly realm chose to be a dictator, and then found out that eventually he'd have to consume his own children. We bring back the children thing. So it's kind of about like, how can you have ethics in your choices? But now we've made the choice. Like, this is the thing. We've made the choice. We say, this is the life we're going to live. Here's how we're going to bring it into its full flowering this season.
I love that. And yeah, that's such the interesting thing about that end decan for Gemini and going into the Cancerian one, and even thinking about the majors that are behind it too, moving from the Lover's card of choice and pathway, and going to the Chariot, which is this, kind of full speed ahead. Like the train is leaving, you get behind the reins, and strain those horses into the direction you want to go, because it literally has this death birth type of energy to it, because if we think about the Ten of Swords and like the finality that comes along with that, I want to call it like a psychic death to some extent, and to be born into this new creative choice.
Well, and what are the chariots that we move through life in?
What are the chariots?
What do our spirits move through life in, right?
Yeah.
The body, right?
The body.
We're like infusing consciousness into a body. So, there may be issues that creep up too with physical issues through Cancerian too. Like, how are you taking care of your vessel, your chariot, your vehicle? I've noticed sometimes when I have difficult moon transits, I have weird aches and pains in various places or things of that nature. So that's something to get in touch with, is how are you taking care of that physical vehicle that's going to move your spirit and consciousness through life.
I love that, because when we talk about nurturing, and this comes back to the whole, how many times you got to tell a Cancer to put your oxygen mask on before you put someone else's.
Totally.
And we think about the moon just being also a representative of the body, and the food for the body, the food for the soul. So I feel like I feel like that is a good word to the wise, Spencer, to pay attention to your body and your bodily rhythms. Because that's the thing, when we're like notice where your energy levels are at when they dip, when they're there, and I think that's part of I feel like that's part of the wisdom of being a Cancerian, is we learn to know when to ride the wave and when to float with it. It might take time to learn these things, but because of its kind of up and down nature.
Absolutely. And it's predictable. Like, that's the thing about a Cancerian is, yes, it may be frustrating that their moods will change, but you're going to have a pretty good idea of when, with track the moon cycle.
2 to 3 days.
Try not to ask your Cancerian friends to do a ton of stuff on the balsamic moon cycle, because we're not full of light. Like, right now, you and I we're in full moon phase. We're just full of energy, full of light, potentially. I don't know, maybe we're also exhausted from all the activity as well. But it's learning to live in lunar cycles is really healing, and I think can be really healthy. I wish our collective could learn to do that a little more instead of just go go go, drive all the time. I think one of the, like you were saying, the Cancerian wisdom is knowing when to act and when to rest, and I think that the moon really reflects that.
Yeah. And yeah, the moon reflects that, and that internal, the intuition, the Cancer's known for the strong intuition. And I think when we go through Cancer season and the sun is making its tour here, a lot of the conscious downloads we can get are going to be intuitive ones. They could be where an image pops in front of your mind's eye and they're of a clairvoyant nature, or you have a potent dream that just speaks to you and it guides you one way or the other. So it's also, we're moving into this feeling state, and we can grow as people through this more receptive, intuitive, sensitive landscape.
Well, think of water as, what kind of qualities does water have as an element? It's a solvent, right? It dissolves things, and it dissolves the boundaries between body and spirit, between, I don't know, it dissolves like our physical structures. It dissolves maybe the thoughts that divide us, maybe the opinions that divide us. It brings things together. So there's a unifying quality, I think, to water as well, wanting to return to source and to a collective oneness, I think, as well. And maybe even a nostalgic yearning for it, I believe.
Yes.
Right? There's one of my favorite
thing.
Well, I'll tell you one of my favorite quotes. It's really just a fascinating turn of phrase. In the Astrology of Fate, I believe Liz Green quotes another philosopher, Erich Neumann, who calls the Cancer Ouroboros incest, the longing to return to the womb or the primordial waters, right? And so like this longing for this golden age of like, what was, maybe even like getting a little nervous about the future, and but it's all wrapped up in those feelings, right? And those strong emotions.
Yeah, and that could be the hard, and that's so interesting to think about as the sun journeys through the entire zodiac. It's like, what precedes water signs, the air signs,
right?
And so it's always, it always just, you dip back in to the feeling and the emotional state after this logical, reasonable, not always reasonable, but
rational
outlook or consciousness, or just where you're at, and the spirit's kind of like presiding through, and then we get plunged. It's like, you ever just like a cold splash of water to the face, or if you dive into a pool and you do a cannonball from being like completely dry, and like there's just this submerge or this kind of like wake up in an emotional state, which for some people can be overwhelming. We talked a lot about that with Jupiter moving into Pisces after being in Aquarius, and kind of that big like overwhelming water shift. But we experience that all the time with any planet that moves from air to water.
Yeah, it's practicing your self-care and regulating those emotions and giving them healthy outlets can be really vital around this period of time, because when we get too full of those feelings, they can leak out, and we can lash out. We can get cranky, moody, and this is why I'm a lifelong journaler. I like to write out all my thoughts and feelings. And as musicians, that the music is an emotional steam valve, right? And getting all of those anxieties, fears, joys, everything, all of it just comes out in those instruments as vehicles for emotional expression as well.
Yeah. So this is a great season to, pick up the instrument, pick up a paintbrush, pick up the journal, support yourself, support your friendships, your family members, your children, if you have them. Because I mean, a Cancer, if there's two things that a Cancer likes to care for things.
Mm,
It likes to be needed,
yeah,
but it also likes to feel care, and it likes to be appreciated. So yeah,
that's true.
and so appreciation, it's like
Yeah.
showing appreciation, giving appreciation, receiving it. It's like this is a great time for us just to be here for each
The
other, I think.
secret agreement is for a Cancer is I'll take care of you if you take care of me. Like
Yeah.
that's really kind of the secret arrangement that
Well,
we all have.
I feel like that's part of the Cancer Capricorn
Yeah.
axis. Is
Yeah.
that's the really the I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine.
Yeah.
It's like Capricorn's if you scratch mine. Cancer's
Yeah.
like I'll scratch your back,
Right.
and
Well,
but the Capricorn's like if you scratch
we
mine.
love nurturing, but we also, sometimes like to be babied ourselves a little bit. And,
Yeah.
I mean, my partner is an excellent chef, and, I'm so grateful for that skill that she possesses, and just feel like that makes me feel loved and nurtured. And then I express my nurturing in slightly different ways, but that's, there's always kind of an enjoyment of that type of exchange that we see in that Two of Cups card, right? In the first decan of Cancers, those really beautiful emotional exchanges of trying to figure out what we really need at our core for survival and for just feeling secure and safe. Safety is another key theme that comes up with
Yeah,
Cancer.
absolutely. You want to know a way to a Cancer's heart? Is a good meal.
Stomach. Yep, through your stomach.
Through the stomach.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and a 401k. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, that's your Capricorn moon talking.
That's all right. Oh, that's funny. Yeah. So
I just had that conversation with my Capricorn son, daughter, about like Roth IRA savings and budgeting and all of these things. She's getting into the adult world and is got really excited about our budget conversation about saving for the future.
Well, good for her. Like it's not that excitement is not within everybody.
No, it isn't.
That's
it isn't.
that's for sure. But even like you bringing up food makes it interesting. Because that's the thing, as we go through Cancer season and food being so important. And we're in just massive inflation right now, and I don't know about you, every time I go to the grocery store, what I'm buying, like the item costs 40 cents more.
Super
like every
right
2
now.
weeks. And I'm like, one day I'm going to go to the store and it's going to be $100 for a can of pickles.
And we're having baby formula shortages.
Oh,
and,
I know.
Things like that. It's the basic, survival needs are becoming harder to attain. And with the, influx of climate change, a lot of our resources are being squandered or burned up or flooded or whatever as well. So we're at a really interesting inflection point as a species, not only just as these small communities, but as a larger community as well. I had a tornado scare the other night here in Michigan, and just reading a lot of articles about how this is something that's part of the summer season now. Is fires, floods, tornadoes, severe weather events, and I wonder what that says about our transition from maybe one elemental age to another, or how we're doing as a collective. Is that some of our fundamental needs aren't being met, and you could argue that a lot of that is from the few taking more than their share and not really caring about equal distribution to the collective, or nurturing the earth that will provide abundance. If we take care of it, it will provide for us. And that's the Cancerian agreement, right? Same thing with our relationship with Gaia or Mother Earth. We take care of it, it will take care of us. But if we exhaust it, if we pillage it, it will react violently, and it won't provide that sustenance and that sustaining energy anymore. And I'm trying to wrap my head around that and how we go forward as a collective. What do you think?
I feel, right before I got on this broadcast with you, I saw article on Vice, and it's like, baby penguins are washing up on New Zealand shore, and I like click it, and I'm like, there's this dead baby penguin here, and
Oh,
penguins
no.
are literally like another Cancerian thing. Back to my
Yeah.
childhood,
Right.
penguins are my favorite animal.
Oh.
So to see like this like baby penguin, and they're like, and it's not the reason you'd think. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure it's the reason I think. And like, I like clicked on the article, like just enough to like read. I'm like, don't show me more dead baby penguins.
Yeah.
But it had to talk, talking about warming, climates, drive the fish that they eat further down into the ocean.
Yeah.
So that, you know, it's not as easy to catch them. And so they're not being able to feed their young, etc. And so these are all the things that come up, and you know, these are just the side stories, and it's not just about our own survival. It's literally about the survival of all
Everything.
creatures, because we're
Yeah.
all, you know, we forget that we're part of a web of life. We like to think that we are our own species and our own entity, and we control, you know, everything around us. But the things
And
that we are,
what hubris is that, right?
I know. We are an ecosystem. We are
Yeah.
literally part of the ecosystem. We are on the chain. We are on the food chain. We might be at the top of
Yeah.
it, but we're on it. And so, and you know, it's easy to think that we can like display, you know, kind of target the people that are in power and at the top and that hold a lot of the resources. And I do think that is a big part of the problem.
Yes.
But it's, you know, obviously it's the system.
Sure.
And we are all individuals, and we take part in the system, and some, you know, and it's hard to break away from the system, you know, like if it is the vehicle that is feeding us, that is keeping us sustained, but we make that individual choice every day to live on, you know, as part of the system. And so it's very complex. And
It is.
I feel like, you know, people love to point the finger and blame particular things. We're all great at that. And I think there's going to be a lot of that this season, you know, with
Yeah,
Cancer,
I do
the
too.
Capricorn full moon near Pluto, all the
Yeah.
Aries energy. It's like, you're the problem, you're the problem, you're the problem, this is the problem. You know, it's like there's problems have nuance.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And at the end of the day, you know, it's everyone's problem.
exactly.
And it's everyone that needs to put their pride aside, take a look in the mirror and figure out what you can do as an individual, while also putting pressure on the system that is the macrocosm. It's like as above, so below, as within, so without, as micro, so macro. So and I know I usually am someone who's trying to provide more comfort. And it's hard though. It's really tough. Maybe it's the Capricorn moon that we're recording this under, but I feel like I have to maybe sound that alarm a little bit louder than I have been in the past. And you remember how you talk about Cancers don't start to fight until something that they love is threatened or through trauma. I'm feeling that right now. I'm feeling that this earth that I love so much, this ecosystem, these animals, these trees, these oceans, this food, I love it so much, and it's under threat right now. And we really need to start fighting harder to save it. And that comes through just talking about it more and normalizing that conversation, rather than just, you know, focusing on our everyday minutia. But that being said, you can't get yourself completely overwhelmed by the weight of the world. So you still do have to function on a daily level. But I hope that we can bring in some of those conversations more and find solutions. And I don't have all the answers, but I can recognize there's a problem, and that's more than a lot of people are willing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we should be normalizing this speech as much as we can. And you know, it's like it's the little things that we can do each day that just are better choices for us, for the planet, for a change in the system, for, you know, because it's like thinking about a ship that sets sail, and if, you know, it's on course for somewhere, but you change that compass by like 2 degrees, 1.5 degree, it's going to end up in a totally different place. by the time, that it gets, gets to this destination. And
And you
so,
change the Earth by 1 or 2 degrees, and that completely changes the
yeah,
ecosystem.
that's exactly.
See, right?
Yeah. So that's, it's easy to get overwhelmed, but if you just make conscious decisions, if I make conscious decisions, my partner last night, I was talking about the coming recession, and I was like, we need to be doing this and this and this, and we need to be, and I am the one who tends to spend a little bit more than
Sure.
he does, because I have a Jupiterian second house. He has a Saturnian second house. And he's like, can you say some I statements here?
Right.
Can you own this? Can you say some I statements? You keep saying we. And I'm like, well,
Yeah.
he's like, I know, but
Personal
you're
responsibility is that's the toughest one, isn't it? Right?
It is. It
Yeah.
is. Yeah. So let's make some I statements.
Yeah,
This
exactly.
Cancer season. Yeah. So, well, let's get into Cancer season,
All
because
right.
we have waxed all about so many things. But once again, we have our solstice on June 21st on Tuesday, and it's going to happen at 10:13 a.m. here Pacific time, but that'll be 5:13 if you're over on Eastern time, like Spencer is. So we're going to wake up basically Tuesday morning, and it's going to be Cancer season. And so there's a couple things going on. Obviously, we know that Aries moon is going to be kicking things off. And so it's probably going to be a lively start to Cancer season, just because we got a last quarter moon square lighten up so much Aries energy. So chances are there's going to be a lot of activity this week. And Venus will have just trined Pluto. So she's doing her own thing. She's just coming off that trine with Pluto, like minutes before the solstice happens. And the next day she basically moves into Gemini. So that's kind of how we start things off here. So any thoughts on that Venus Pluto action?
Yeah, that's coming off, in the next few weeks here at the end of our, month of June. Venus is going to square Pluto or square Saturn, and then make that trine to Pluto. So some kind of wake up call in our relationships and our desire nature and the way that we, utilize resources is going to lead hopefully to the type of transformative change that Pluto may be asking of the system right now, like moving through Capricorn. So maybe some of those shortages that we're experiencing at the store, inflation, things like that, with the denial of things that we want with Venus squaring Saturn, will then lead to the positive, maybe painful, but transformative changes that are necessary. And then when we move into Gemini, that may, after we've been renewed, potentially, our possibilities expand, right? We have that bifurcated awareness. We've gone through the third decan of Taurus, which is all about repentance, I guess is the word I would say. It's sort of like, what went wrong? Did you learn something from it? And how do you fix it? I've learned, man, I'll tell you, I recently became a homeowner, and all throughout these planets' movement through Taurus 3, everything was breaking. Like the dryer stopped heating up. Like I had to fix the dryer. That was one of my triumphant Cancerian Virgo, triple planet in Virgo placement victories was replacing the thermal fuse on my dryer, which was a $5 part that saved a $500 replacement. So kind of giving the big middle finger to planned obsolescence is a rebellious act in these times, right? That want us to conspicuously consume at every corner and build it into the things that we buy. So that might be some of what we're experiencing with Venus, kind of going through those motions with Saturn and Pluto, and then expanding our awareness of possibilities in our relationships and in our desires moving into Gemini.
That's an interesting point with Yeah, just pulling back real quick and thinking about Mercury having just gone through this whole 3-part trine with Pluto, and
Yeah.
I think on the around the last trine before it made it back into Gemini, there was news where I think it was in New York, they passed a new law where basically putting pressure on electronics companies like Apple and like, not providing parts for electronics because so that they can just, so you just
Right.
buy a new one and
Yeah.
you can't fix it. So we're just buy a new one. We're not going to give you the things you need to like keep
Yeah.
that obsolescence,
Well, that's the
keeping things
culture now,
around.
right? We have these big like launch events for the new phone 3 months after the last one came out. The newest, the best, the brightest, and it's predatory. And a
It
lot of
is.
and a lot of the times we don't actually need it, and these companies prey upon or try to prey upon our insecurities or even create them through their advertisement
Yeah.
to make us feel less than, so that we can't, so that we need to buy their product to fill that hole. And yeah, tech is becoming the most manipulative. Like, so even when sometimes they think that they're um, you think that a company might be more ethical, it's still, there's a dark side to it. So
Well,
yeah,
there's a bottom line. At the end
that's
of the day,
true.
a company wants to make money. That is
That's
the
true.
goal. That is the goal of all companies, unless you're a nonprofit. And even then, depending on the nonprofit,
Yeah.
have to see. It's about that capital. But I just thought it was interesting that you brought up that story. And I was like, hey, that happened around Mercury, Pluto too. That because that's gonna send pressure to, you can't have one state that has something like that. That'll spread out. So
Yeah.
that's good news. But yeah, so Venus does do this interesting thing. I'm curious. Gray and I were talking about this in the um 2022 part 2 that we did last week, but knowing that Venus is under so much pressure with Venus issues, like obviously women's rights and bodily issues and in Roe versus Wade and stuff like that. I'm just curious if there's something that happens in these days leading up to before she moves into Gemini, because I feel like Venus is going to get a lot louder. I feel like she's going to have some things to say. Venus
Yeah.
has things to say in Gemini, and she's she
She's morning star Venus right now too, which is the
yeah,
warrior
that's right.
goddess, right? And she's getting further away, I believe, from the sun still, or is she coming back? I don't know if she got to that greatest elongation point, but she's very visible right now.
Very
And
visible.
that Sumerian paradox with Venus, they thought it was two different deities on some level with the morning star. What I'm trying to think of the word. You've got the Vespertine Venus, which is the nighttime Venus, and then what is the morning Venus? Do you remember that term? It's
Morning
escaping
Venus.
me. Well, there's a specific term for it, but
No, hers morning Venus.
yeah, the morning star Venus is much more aggressive and less about unifying things and more about fighting for what she believes in. So values.
Yeah, she's not in her normal sect phase. She
Right.
she doesn't go along with just doesn't go along with it. She's like, wait a second, hold
Yeah.
on, I don't know. And and here she is, she's moving. It's interesting because she moves from her domicile in Taurus there. She loses dignity, but she's got Mercury
Yeah, that's
right.
nice.
She's got Mercury right there. So it's almost like, it's interesting. It's almost like she gains a voice because
Right.
Taurus being more of a mute nature, as far as like there's stillness and quiet that is there. But now she's backed by Mercury, and Mercury's got plenty to say in Gemini.
Absolutely. It's a great time to increase your ability to communicate between worlds, between factions, between different opinions, and try to increase your flexibility when it comes to relationship talks.
Yes.
And Mercury is really going to be helping in this case.
Yeah, I feel like it can be a lot. It's going to be a nice position to just relational communication, but also communicating in a way that it better understands the dualistic nature of relating and life, and how like this can be true, that could be true. It gives relating a little space.
Yeah.
And it depends on how you like to relate, because if you're not one that likes so much space, or you like a little control, or you like things to be, stable, there is this kind of, things get kind of kicked up there with Venus in Gemini. But I think it adds a little levity to relating too, and kind
Sure.
of getting out and about is, with your significant others, meeting people. It feels like a very social um, combination, especially when Mercury is there. We're just more likely to talk and connect and hopefully listen
Well,
to
I'm a
people.
Venus in Gemini native myself, and definitely, words of affirmation are some of my love languages. And
Oh,
I really like, creating connections with vastly different people, like from all over the world or from different parts of society. That's something that I really enjoy, harmonizing. So there may be an ability to harmonize differing viewpoints, some ones that would normally be irreconcilable, which I think is, that's what we might be seeing. We're seeing rumblings of that in our lawmakers in America around potentially, gun legislation. Is there's rumblings of compromises that might be made as far as like actually doing something about some of these really challenging issues. And that's something that people wouldn't have imagined, maybe even a few weeks ago, before some of these really, really difficult tragedies we've been experiencing.
yeah, no, I love that. I love that viewpoint. Yeah, making peace or harmony with alternative sides,
Right.
and their opinions and views. And like, I'm skipping ahead of myself, but she will sextile Jupiter there when we think about legislation and laws and things along those lines. So perhaps there will be some coming together, or at least talk of coming together.
Yeah.
I don't know how
Yeah.
much action actually happens if it's just all
Yeah.
talk.
That has been kind of the MO lately, isn't it? Like, oh, we passed it in this one area of the government, but then it's, oh, sorry, we couldn't get it passed
Couldn't
in
get it
the
past this
Senate.
one.
Like, yeah, it's
No. Oh, we're making
some,
progress
yeah,
in one
so
area, but not real
yeah,
progress
it's
because
frustrating.
chain of command.
Yep.
Yeah, it is. So, well, anyways, Venus, get out there, socialize, kick things up with the people that you love, go entertain yourself with, intellectual types of fun and pleasure, going to museums, or uh starting a book club. I feel like starting a book club
Yeah, there you go.
would be perfect for Venus and Gemini, only because I think someone invited me to their book club like 2 days ago, so maybe that's why. But they were reading a horrible book, and I was like, I ain't got time for that. I ain't got
Sure.
time for that.
Yeah, book clubs are
um
fun.
so it actually is kind of quiet, after Venus moves into Gemini on the 23rd there. There's kind of, the moon just moves through Taurus. She's getting darker and darker in phase. And it's not until the 27th when we have our next planetary configuration of Mars and Aries making a sextile to Saturn in Aquarius. And this is all kind of in these dark hours just before we have our new moon in Cancer there. But it is interesting to think, because there's, in Mars's journey, there's a couple things that need to happen before it leaves Aries. That's the sextile to Saturn, but notably so, not long after is also the square to Pluto.
Yeah, that's,
So
I'm
it's,
not looking forward
no
to
one's
that.
looking forward.
No.
Everyone's like, ooh,
Yeah,
ah.
that's a
Um,
rough one.
it
That's
is
gonna
a
be a rough
rough
one.
one, but it makes me wonder if the two are connected in some way, or lead up. And that's the only reason I'm kind of bringing that in, even though the Pluto square is going to happen on July 1st after we have our new moon. So they're in different parts of the cycle, but it does straddle this new moon energy. And there always seems to be like foreshadowing, I think, before the new moon, in the days that precede it. There's just kind of this like liminal energy that's brewing. And so how do you view this Mars Aries Saturn's now retrograde. So it is retrograde.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I think the Any Mars story that I've been talking about recently, I've been anticipating the retrograde later in the year, in October, when
Yes.
Mars is moving through Gemini. So there's a number of planets moving through Gemini at the end of this lunar cycle that are going to be themes that Mars is going to, kick up later in the year. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The second thing I think is the sextile between Mars and Saturn here. Generally, Mars and Saturn, when they come together, there's sort of this like foot on the gas, foot on the brakes type of energy, right? where you, this frustration, there's this bubbling of frustration, this brewing of something where you really want to move forward, but it's hitting the brick wall. But with this sextile relationship, Mars in the last decan of Aries is really about charisma that's necessary to win people over to your point of view. All right, so that's that Four of Wands card, that Hesed energy. It's a Venus ruled decan in a Mars sign. So it's like, hey, can we like charm someone over to our point of view? So there might be a lot of like passionate, inspirational speeches about how to change the collective narrative, which is Saturn retrograding, right?
Yeah. Well, you're saying that, right? As I'm looking at the chart and it's like moon conjunct Mercury that day.
Right. There you go.
I'm like,
There you
that
go.
speaks to,
Yeah,
passionate
definitely.
speeches. Yeah, definitely having something to say there. And the moon will light up that position on the 27th. So there will be like a lunar activation that kind of kicks off that Mars Saturn energy. And it does have that, speaking of someone who's born with the square, it is very gas brake, gas brake, gas brake, or trying to do the same at the same time. And you're just squealing in place and you're like, wait, I'm not going anywhere, but
And
I'm just burning rubber.
Which planet in your chart is in the overcoming position?
Mars.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's interesting here because Saturn is in the overcoming position to Mars. So, that I always look at that when we have these squares, because really Saturn's in the driver's seat, even though, it's retrograde, it is exerting that influence over Mars. It is technically, quote unquote, more like, I don't know, powerful, although somebody would probably argue with me because of the retrograde motion of Saturn. But I do think that Saturn's need to slow down, need to think of the bigger picture, may be forcing us to really kind of reconsider some of our maybe more independent initiatives because of a collective need that we're bound to take care of. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, and to me, that's the nice thing about the sextile and the trine between these two is that there is a question of effort, because Mars is going to give us that drive to go after and succeed at something, and Saturn is the long-term view of that and the plan and the strategy to some extent. So there is like a consistent effort that can happen here too. But I like you bringing up that Saturn in the overcoming position kind of tempers that strong Mars in a sense to like, okay, well, let's can't just act off instinct or go out after this, because there's going to be this need to expand and move, because this is happening under just a day before the new moon, that is a new moon square Jupiter. So there's just going to be this collective urge to expand and make progress in some way, because we're pushing towards that. But we need a good plan. We need a good strategy. We can't just I think I used this term in another podcast recently, that can't just blow our load.
Sure.
Saturn's like, and in retrograde, it could be an internalized process, where that Aquarius area of our chart is speaking to us in a Saturnian fashion, and in helping to temper and formulate perhaps those Mars moves. So which is interesting because it is like preceding the idea of Mars squaring Pluto. And of course, collectively, this is something that we're all like, I don't know. But in our own lives, it's intriguing to think about, because if we're really in tune with where we want to make consistent effort and we're kind of internalizing that, we know we're on this cycle of progress. A lot of times the cycle of progress, because Jupiter is backed by Mars still, that's going to require possibly deep changes or purification processes or big moves of some sort, that in order to get that Saturn stability or that Saturn kind of contract, you got to go through Pluto's gate in order to progress there.
Well, and you get the reality check. Mars gets the reality check from Saturn, and then is immediately applying to Pluto there. Yeah. So, sometimes when you get a sober realization, it brings things up from the underworld. It brings up strong emotions. It brings up feelings. It brings up corruption that needs to be dealt with. And that's probably the action I see with the sextile to Saturn and then the square to Pluto is, some limitations that we have to come to terms with. Some people may rebel against that. Other people may get violent. Other people may have a deep catharsis around it, where they're releasing long buried, long repressed feelings, and all of those things coming to the surface in an explosive way. Unfortunately, Mars Pluto is one of that's one of the aspects that like you were saying, astrologers are like, like I don't know if there's anybody that's like, oh yeah, Mars Pluto square, that's awesome. There's some intensity. Intense. Intensity for sure.
It is intense, and that is something to think about too. Is like right when we get off of that new moon, basically the next day, I believe, on the 28th, we got the new moon. And then, it'll be on the 30th, the day before the moon will light up that Mars Pluto.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So Yikes. Thursday is extremely explosive. Thursday, the 30th of June. I don't want to skip ahead of our new moon here, or that we didn't talk about Neptune stationing within all this. I think that's an intriguing part of this all. And so, what do you think about Neptune doing its?
What's the date on that?
About phase. Neptune's on the 28th. It's literally 4 hours before the new moon.
So that 28th day, I've had that marked down as a pretty active day, because Neptune stations retrograde, the sun squares Jupiter that day. And then we've got a sextile with Venus and Jupiter, and then that's the new moon. It's all happening like at once. It's all basically happening. So I think that Neptune retrograde. These outer planets do this for a good portion of each year, so it's not like it's a super unique thing. But I do think that those being more collective planets, from my understanding, that it is felt subtly amongst the masses. And Neptune, I don't know what your experience of Neptune is, but I've had the other commiserating conversations about Neptune having sort of a malefic nature sometimes, where it's supposed to be like this boundary dissolver, maybe even this aspiration to transcendence. I really relate to the way Robert Schmidt talked about Neptune as a transcendental moon, where it's sort of related to that hermetic quality of the one thing and the one mind, and Neptune being the one thing and Uranus being the one mind. So think about Neptune as primordial substance, like that ocean of consciousness that we were talking about earlier. And dissolving boundaries can be very transcendent. Like, it can bring us together, it can bring us peace, but it can also be utilized by dictators that want to, ethnically cleanse a nation. Do you know what I'm saying? To make it homogenous. And so it's a dual-edged sword. And I think that Neptune in the third decan of Pisces is related to crusades. They talk a lot about this in the literature around this decan. It's got that that beautiful rainbow 10 of cups energy, right? This very idealistic energy. But what's hidden beneath that is the wild swings of emotion, and saying it's a Mars ruled decan in the descending Chaldean order. So it's like, what are you willing to sacrifice for your dream? And we may have to review the dream a little bit with Neptune moving backwards. Anytime I get Neptune contacts in my chart, like with a personal planet, I just feel like melting into a puddle on the couch. I don't know if you feel this, but
Neptune has washed away some of my hardest efforts. Although it was combined with Pluto transits while I was experiencing both. So that was just my lot at that particular time in my life. But Neptune's a tricky planet. I mean, and it's known to be such, and some people consider it. I've heard certain astrologers say that it is the most difficult planet because of its illusory nature. Like, it's hard to put a finger on it. It rules things like glamour and spectacle, and when we're just enthralled with something that we see, and we're mesmerized. This is a Neptunian characteristic. Neptune is associated with grief, and it brings us to this bottomless pit of pain and suffering that certain situations in life can bring to the forefront. It has the miraculous nature where it's like, you hear these stories of my guardian angel came out and just saved me from the depth. I was drowning in the depths of something, and all of a sudden the miracles came about. And I've seen that. Like, I've seen people going through Neptune transits, and they're having people on like the edge of life, like about to, like, you would think they would die, and all of a sudden they make a miraculous comeback. And they, it's really hard to put a finger on. But what I think is fascinating about Neptune just having the station at the time of this new moon, and it being a new moon that is so tied up, like almost exactly into that square with Jupiter, is the one thing that we think about Neptune recently is the Jupiter-Neptune square. So it's kind of, or not square, excuse me, conjunction. And so Jupiter having this grand move of sorts with the luminaries for the first time in Aries, backed by Neptune kind of doing its backwards motion. It's like they're not in the same sign anymore, but there is still this connection that they made, and Jupiter will be going back into Pisces.
And maybe Neptune retrograding is the stripping of illusion, of saying, we really got blinded by the glamour of, they used to associate Neptune with like film and photography and the movie industry. And really what it is they're glamorous lies, because it's not reality, right? So, and that's a very negative take on it. But maybe there is this something where we put our hope into, that we're reviewing now, that says, well, what is the reality of this? What is the, are we being blinded by what we wish was true rather than what is true?
Well, and that speaks exactly to what you brought up with the Mars Saturn sextile that happens the day before, the idea of the reality check kind of coming in, and the dispelling of illusion in some sense, or where the illusion bubbles up and then it recedes. Like how when you're like on the road and you see a mirage in front of you, and as you get closer, all of a sudden it disappears. And it's like, I feel like that's kind of the
still
nature
thirsty.
and you're still thirsty. And so I kind of feel like it could almost be something like that, where it just kind of recedes and turns, and then poof, it's gone. But it is, to go back to what you were saying earlier about all these kind of Mars precursors, because Mars is going to be intricately aligned with Neptune later in the year with its station. And so all these Neptune moves can, especially Mars sextiling Saturn and about to square Pluto, even though it's not in contact with Neptune, it's interesting that there's action from both planets who are going to be very active with each other later in the year.
Absolutely. Metacycles.
Yeah. Well, what do you think about old Venus kind
Mm.
of tapping in, doing a tap dance sextile for
Yeah, I
Gemini?
mean, that's a nice aspect here that we have, the Venus Jupiter sextile. And honestly, the square to this new moon at 7 degrees of Cancer from Jupiter in Aries, I don't necessarily see that as a super negative square either, because that's Jupiter in the overcoming position, which in traditional astrology was actually fairly fortunate. So I think that there still might be a little bit of tension between the two luminaries in Cancer and Aries, as far as like this desire to individuate, this desire to start something new, to pioneer something, and how that might affect the people that we care about. I mean, that could be part of it. Like, we were really excited about something new, but maybe it changes the arrangements and the relationships and how we nurture one another. And that could take some tact and, excuse me, navigation. And I think Venus and Gemini could help with that, have those positive conversations about, hey, what is our new reality? Because 7 degrees of Cancer is on a fixed star called Meersum, and that's the star that comes, it was called the announcer star, which comes before Sirius, which is the one of the most important fixed stars to the ancient Egyptians, because that was the announcing of when Sirius came back. That's when the Nile River Valley would flood and fertility would return to the land. So there may be something that comes out that's this big announcement that we really have to process. Maybe it's in our personal life, maybe it's in the collective. It's probably going to be both. That is before something much more significant that is yet to come.
It's interesting. We're talking about like having those Jupiter Venus conversations. It's like Venus is like, let me tell you about something. Let me tell you about the plan. Let me tell you,
Right.
let me tell you about how we're going to progress. Let me just,
Yeah.
and then Mars and Pluto is like, but there's all this that lies underneath, like,
Yep.
yeah, Venus is going to sweet talk into the change, but really it's all, Jupiter is backed by this Mars about to square Pluto. And so it's it's
Well,
almost like you might have to not sweet talk it, but you know what I mean. Use
I
words
think
cleverly.
I would say it's like this, Mel, and I'm just looking at this and kind of thinking about this a little more. Whatever new change we might want to initiate with the new moon, with the Venus Jupiter sextile and Jupiter squaring, the lunation, we may be tempted to use forceful, nefarious means to get what we want, right? When Mars and Pluto come together, oftentimes that's kind of like the Al Capone aspect, right? Where it's like, all right, we're gonna do this thing, but it's gonna be like in this organized, violent, chaotic underworld, organized crime type of way. So I would encourage everyone out there to, even though you may have strong desires to make a new start with Jupiter and Aries and Mars and Aries, make sure to stay above board and to be true to your integrity, because eventually, if you are outside of your integrity, those things will be uncovered, and it can cause more problems than solutions in your life.
Yeah. More problems and solutions. We
Yeah.
don't want that. Well, what a way to start the Cancer lunar cycle.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the seeding event for the next 28 days. Follow
Yikes.
the 28th. And why I think it's going to be an important cycle, and especially,
Yeah.
and it's kind of the back to back, with the Leo one that comes not too, afterwards. It's going to be trining Jupiter, and there's going to be some serious things going on in that chart too. So there's kind
Yeah.
of, it's almost like a Cancer and Leo. And as we know, what's coming down the pipeline in Leo season, they're kind of, these are back-to-back seasons that have a lot of big energy to them, but it really feels like this is kind of the kickoff event to that. So
Absolutely.
yeah, we've, and so basically on the first there, that is when Mars is going to officially square Pluto on Friday, July 1st. So there, and I think it's going to be a little bit more of the 30th, just because that is when that moon in Cancer is going to make a T-square with those planets. So even though it happens on Friday, if you're looking for news cycles and you want to see the action, chances are we're gonna have things kick up then. And then even the trine later in from Leo, and get that fiery energy kicking through on July 4th weekend here in the US, on the 2nd. There's kind of like this elongated activation of this energy. So, just be cautious out there, and don't fly off the handle with not knowing what you're dealing with. This is the last day you're going to want to get in a fight on the road, or challenge people that you don't know who they are, or even challenge people that you do know who they are, that could be a little bit of a loose cannon. Like, it's just one of these times where,
and this is something
stay in your lane.
This is something to think about with Cancer too, is some of the shyness that maybe somebody would ascribe to a Cancerian. Some of it's self-preservation. I think that a lot of the times when we are too loud about, our opinions or whatnot, that can attract the type of attention that could put us in a dangerous or threatening situation. And by being modest, by being unassuming, unobtrusive, sometimes that can actually lead to being safer. And it's getting a little wild out there, I have to admit. There's some, I don't know, I'm not trying to be the Debbie Downer today, but I'm feeling a lot of strong emotions about what's going on in the collective, with our collective traumas, with our collective, weather cycles and stuff like that. And I think that a lot of our work in the next month ahead is, how do we take care of our mental health? How do we take care of our bodies? How do we take care of our community when we're facing these pressures, these collective pressures? And the pressures get more intense when we have things like recession. Things get more expensive when people are housing insecure, whether they're facing natural disasters or things of that nature. So recognize that. I would say to people, you're not alone if you're feeling that way. We're all going through quite a bit right now. And just try to give both yourself and the people around you some extra grace, because it's going around.
Absolutely. 100% back that advice. I'm just thinking about you brought up weather, and I'm just looking at it. I'm like, oh, this seems like a pretty volatile weather cycle.
Sure.
Just thinking about like Neptune stationing and a cardinal water moon squaring Jupiter. And that Mars Pluto, it's like there is a chance for extreme weather events to happen. And there already are happening. Look at what's happening in Yellowstone right now, and over in your neck of the woods, tornadoes just blowing through just at the drop of a hat, and you don't know. So stay on the lookout for that. There seems to be the vigilance.
Vigilance is important, because I will say that our experience earlier this week, and I think I'm still coming off some of the stress of that, is that I got an email from the electric company saying there's a huge storm coming your way in about 3 hours, and there's 70-mile-an-hour winds coming. Prepare
3 hours.
Prepare accordingly. So what we did is we just moved all the things off the porch. We got all of our emergency supplies ready to go. We had a plan for if we're going to pack our cats up to go into the basement and things like that. I talked to my neighbors in my community and said, hey, this weather event is coming. Are you prepared? And they weren't. So they were grateful that we were kind of giving them the heads up type of thing. And those are the types of things that you can do, is can help your neighbor out if they need those type of emergency preparedness plans. Now, luckily for us at this house, that storm went 10 miles south of us, and we were spared the absolute worst of us. That being said, a friend of mine who their neighbor 10 miles south of us, their house was struck by lightning and went up in flames and completely burned to the ground. So it hits close to home. And I had friends in Chicago over the weekend there were multiple trees that were just rooted absolutely just right out of the ground. And I think that that's really shocked me awake. I think that a lot of those things, when you see them, for example, you live in California, wildfires to the Midwesterners they're sort of real, but they're sort of like this theoretical thing that they don't have to deal with every day, right? Although I will say in the last couple of years, I've seen the sun in the Midwest being blocked out by smoke from the West Coast, showing us how connected we really are.
Yeah.
But just having a plan, having conversations with your family, your friends, your neighbors, because these extreme weather events, these extreme social events are going to start to become more regular, and especially in the summer seasons where we, in this country and in the world. And it's not just exclusively to the West Coast with fires, the East Coast with hurricanes and flooding. Even if you live in central, part of America here, there's changes happening. And scientists have been warning these alarm bells for a long time. But now this is sort of the chickens coming home to roost. And we just have to adjust. This is what's great about human beings is we've survived this long because of how flexible we are and how intelligent we can be when we work together for solutions. So I think that instead of becoming just really freaked out about it, a good amount of what you said, vigilance and preparedness, is super important. And I say that completely from love, in the way of not wanting people to get hurt or get stuck in a dangerous situation. So this is my Cancerian mother bear coming out trying to say, please be prepared and take care of yourself, because there is some dangers around right now. That is like think of a bird in the woods that is part of a flock that is, you could hear them when there's a predator around, like the alarm call is being sounded. And I think that's the stage that we're at, unfortunately, is the alarm calls need to be sounded. And as long as we're prepared, we can adjust. But if we get caught unprepared, that's when the suffering is most intense.
Yeah. And I think that's part of the lesson of Uranus and Taurus. It's like,
yeah,
we want to stay comfortable.
Yeah.
You want to, and in Cancer, you want to cling. You want to cling to what
Yep.
you know. You want to cling to what's familiar. But in this vastly changing landscape,
or pretend that it isn't happening.
If I just tuck back into my shell,
Yep.
none of this will happen.
That's a Cancerian thing too, is just be like, nope, nothing to see here. La 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 la, fingers in the ears. That's why if I'm saying this stuff, this is
if we come too far,
like if us Cancerians are like saying, hey, wake up, like something's really wrong, because most of the time we'd rather just be like in our own happy sacred sanctuaries, reading our books, eating our food, and petting our cats. So but that experience to me was the weather came to me.
What the experience was is that your home was threatened.
Exactly. No, and that's Cancer in a nutshell, right? We can ignore everything around us until our things that we care about are threatened. And that's exactly what I'm talking about today, is my family, my pets, my house was under threat.
Your newly acquired house.
Right, exactly. Just bought this house and I don't want to blow down 3 weeks after we purchased it. So yeah, and I think that's something with us as a country too, is we tend to ignore problems in other parts of the world until it actually affects us too, with this like radical isolationism that we've been raised on for centuries now. And it's becoming quite apparent that we are so connected that we can't escape these interconnected web of life relationships. And what happens somewhere else, what happens in Ukraine, what happens in Russia, does have an effect here at home. What happens in Africa or Asia or all of these other places, we're going to feel it now. And that's, I think, what one of the main lessons of that Saturn-Jupiter conjunction that we saw in Aquarius, that we talked about, is that recognizing that we are part of a one world here. And the pandemic, I think, taught us that too, where, hey, you know what? If something originates in this other country, it's going to find you. Like it can travel over across borders, across oceans, across, a room. So it's really making me change just my thought processes on a lot of things. And I think that the real challenge that we have as astrologers now is, how do we help people through this new reality? How do we help them find meaning in this new reality? And it's not necessarily how do we help them find comfort. It's how do we help them find meaning, and so that they can answer the call to whatever they need to do and whatever role they need to have within this new reality.
Ain't that the truth?
Right?
It's a lot. It's a lot to be living right now.
It's a ton, yeah.
And it is crazy because if any of us were plopped back down into anywhere on this planet, maybe 500 years ago, we'd be like, what the,
Right.
like it'd probably be much tougher than this.
Sure.
But we have cultivated our landscape to be so accommodating in many ways that as people
Well, and you can get nostalgic for those other times too. I'm guilty of, I've been watching Stranger Things. Are you a Stranger Things fan?
I am. I just started the first episode, so no spoilers.
Okay,
or not the first episode, but the first of the fourth season.
Okay, well, what I'll say without spoiling anything is that it's it's getting bad when you're nostalgic for like the mid '80s. And a town that's being haunted by a demon. Like you're like, that looks fine. That looks better.
Honestly, I know. I feel you, right? Because it's like this. I had a moment maybe about a decade ago where I was angry for growing up in the 80s because I felt like I was lied to. Like I grew up on like just 100%. Lies of this of life, of the world, of this country, of
9/11 was the big watershed moment for me, really. That was the huge wake-up call from all those lies that you're experiencing. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I just feel like, so it's interesting that being a cornerstone piece of nostalgia right now, Stranger Things. And I love that. Yeah, let's go back to the 80s. Yeah, we'll deal with the demon. We already understand the demon. The demon's here, but maybe, I could long for this place that I used to know, or this familiarity, to some extent. That's really funny. So anyways, we're tangenting off here, but
we're nostalging out.
We're nostalging out, which can happen during Cancer season. You're going to find yourself there. You might want to get back in with your favorite foods. You're like, oh, I haven't had this dish in a long time. Or my mom used to make this when I was a kid, or a childhood friend shows up and you catch up, etc. But I think we got into this because we were talking about weather for a hot second. And this new moon that's kind of got a lot of interesting signatures. But what's fascinating too is after this Mars Pluto square on July 1st, it's like the next day, Mercury is activating this fascinating configuration that just happens to be going on right now with any planets traveling through Taurus and Gemini. Is this square, this Neptune Saturn lineup. So here we have Mercury, who's going to square Neptune but trine Saturn, which is funny because I'm pretty sure as we speak, Spencer and I here today, the sun is in this exact configuration. And so they're Mercury trine Saturn. I feel like here's a solid plan coming to the forefront, or our minds are in this logical, reasonable space. And, we kind of have this foresight, but then there's this squared Neptune, and so what do you take from this matchup of two totally different planets? I
think that Mercury, or Hermes, is that rational mind. It is the thought process. It moves between worlds. It's trying to question things. It casts doubt on things. And when it's matching up with Neptune here, a lot of our thoughts can, go very far afield, like off to these places that they wouldn't normally go to, and Mercury already has a tendency to do that. So it could be just this very I don't know, our mind's just really going off into left field here. And maybe this is happening with the sun square Neptune too. Maybe Spencer's just a little shaken up by the tornado that came by his house. So,
and rightfully so.
yeah.
Well, that's why I was thinking about weather patterns too,
Yeah.
because we think about Mercury and like any type of alerts coming out
Right.
with a square to Neptune and a trine to Saturn. Like I feel like this could be a
yeah, but those decans, the last decan of Gemini is really about choice, and it's really about saying, hey, something has to die so something else can live. It's really the story of those two twins, Castor and Pollux, where one was mortal and one was immortal, and one of them died in a battle with another set of twins, and the immortal twin petitioned Zeus to allow them to split time on Olympus and in Hades. So it's kind of, I go back to the transition between Gemini and Cancer, where you have so many pathways that you could pursue, but you have to eventually let go of one of them so that you can breathe life into what's really important to you. And that may be a moment here with the Mercury area of our chart, the Gemini and Virgo areas of our chart that Mercury rules. We may be having to let go of an illusion to breathe life into something that we are really passionate about, that we're truly passionate about. And let me just also preface all the things I've been saying today is the answer, the best answer I can come up with for getting through some of this is just gratitude, just like really being in the moment, enjoying the moment, and you have to have a long-term viewpoint, but just having gratitude for the people that you have in your life and learning that the time is fleeting and things of that nature. This is something else I've been kind of going through a lot with a lot of transitions in my life recently, is just appreciating what we have as well, rather than always desiring the things that we don't. And that may be part of the Mercury Neptune square too, is we may have these desires for things that are maybe slightly unattainable, and we're always wishing something would be greener on the other side, or the grass would be greener.
Yeah, it always looks greener.
It does.
But then someone's on that grass and they think that grass looks greener, and then that person's grass looks greener than their grass, and it's a vicious cycle of grass is greener, because it's nobody's happy in the place they're in. No, that's not true. But
well,
but
maybe it is
struggle
though.
with that.
I think it is true on some level. I think everybody has a little bit of a sense of dissatisfaction with their life. It's in some area of their life, but the gratitude is a discipline. It's not just something that comes naturally all the time. It's something that you have to choose over and over and over again. And it really is something that it takes effort, especially when we're inundated with all of this macrocosm challenge, scarcity, tragedy, is how can you choose to refocus and reshift to what you can control, what you do have agency over, and be grateful for that. And it's just a shift of focus a little bit. And granted, I've been focusing on the macrocosm things, but that's why I wanted to bring a little bit of balance to that when I was talking today too. So yeah, I think that Mercury is going to give us the final set of information and facts that we need to make a choice before we move forward from that square.
Yeah. Well, and I think that it kind of comes with the wake-up call that we were talking about earlier that just happens a few days before this. It's like it's going to give us the facts. It's going to give us the things we need. There could be some bitter truths in there. There could be some slight bitter pills, but then it challenges the illusion. It challenges the ideal. It challenges the way we would prefer to see things as they, rather than they really are, like you were just bringing that up. So it's like,
Mercury asks great questions. It asks great questions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
So no, that's I think that could be just part of that shift that takes place. And so, and it's interesting too, because it's almost like what we're going through right now, like as Spencer and I speaks today on the 15th of June, as the sun lights us up. And this is the beauty of Mercury in its phase that it's in, because the sun leads the way through these transits before Mercury can get there. And so it's almost like we've already had, the solar influence and in the consciousness, and something being brought to light, and it's having Mercury follow this up. That's where that information and the specifics can come in afterwards. So chances are it's playing on a story that's already been developed anyways, and just the right information then comes in. And then not too long after, on July 4th, actually July 4th and July 5th, about on our Independence Day.
One thing before we go to there, on the 3rd, speaking of Mercury, sorry, I even wrote this on my notes. Mercury is going to go under the beams of the sun right at that moment that it's squaring Neptune. So it's going to disappear from visibility and sort of like returning to the Earth or returning to Olympus, one of the two. To deliver a message maybe behind the scenes, because in that superior conjunction phase, I've talked to Gary Caton about this. So he's the Mercury expert, the Hermes expert, and I wanted to know, when was Hermes in the underworld as the psychopomp guide of souls? And he said usually during the retrograde hidden phase, right, where it's not visible, making the retrograde inferior conjunction, and then it's visiting maybe Olympus and bringing something from maybe the higher realms back to the Earth. So that may be what we're experiencing here too, is maybe the contact with Mercury and Neptune is receiving a message from these other realms about an illusion that we have to let go of, and then bringing it back to our conscious awareness with the Mercury's connection with the sun later at the Cazimi moment.
Yeah, and the Cazimi moments is very potent, this particular one, and especially in relation to the United States chart, which Gray and I talked about on last program. So there is something to be said about this moment for sure. And so, Mercury's speeding along here. It's like July 3rd that happens, and pretty much the next day, on July 4th, or at least late in the day, we have two things happening that are kind of carrying over July 4th to July 5th. And that's the simultaneous ingress of Mercury into Cancer, Mars into Taurus, and then the two of them sextiling basically right as that happens. And so Mars moving into Taurus is definitely some
Funky.
big news here.
Yeah.
How did you say clunky?
Funky.
Funky.
Yeah.
Clunky. Gotta make sense.
Clunky too. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that they sextile at 0 degrees and 0 minutes. Like
Wow.
like it crosses over and they're like, bing.
Yeah.
And that is on, I guess it's 30 minutes before midnight here on July 4th on the Pacific coast, but it'll be in the middle of the night over on the eastern side.
Just be careful. Be careful when you're shooting off your fireworks.
Because Mars
at
the last degree of Aries on the day of fireworks sounds explosive.
Right.
So everybody be careful out there with it, and not even just fireworks. Careful around that barbecue. Yep. Don't put on too much. Don't get overzealous with that.
Anything with fire, be careful.
Yeah. Anything with fire, absolutely. Yep. Be careful there. But it does have a. And
I will say too, Mercury, when it's making its superior conjunction, like we're seeing, Mercury is moving super, super fast. So our brains might be moving a little bit faster than they should be. So we may be feeling a little bit rushing, like we're rushing through things, and like we're going from one thing to the next, especially with Mercury in the last degrees of Gemini. I could see what could happen on like July 4th. Here's just an imaginary tragedy.
An imaginary tragedy.
Terrible. I mean, this is just so, a warning though, because maybe people will recognize themselves. Imagine you have someone over for the summer barbecue and you're trying to have a conversation with Uncle Bob or Uncle Jim over here. Aunt Susie's over there, you're trying to do something with the kids, and you're trying to do something on the grill, and you're getting distracted, and your attention is split in so many different directions that you don't realize that there's a grease fire that just started on your grill, and is going to burn you all the hair off your arm if you aren't paying attention. So it's more about staying focused, not letting your attention get split in too many directions, especially when you're dealing with things like fireworks, barbecue grills, anything like that. Yeah, it's
Well, because it's so interesting because you think it might be a square, but it's like the Mercury and Mars in that sextile position. It's like
Yeah.
it's like an easy transmission of fire.
Yep.
Because Mercury is essentially just here. Let me carry that over to you. Let me make let me finish that transaction for you.
Yeah.
And Mars is like, thank you. I've been trying to light this place up all night.
Well, and there's fuel for the fire with Mercury in an air sign, right?
Yeah.
See?
Yeah.
So and it's like
and that's comes down to conversations, right?
Yeah.
You don't get in that. I feel very lively conversations
explosive
will be happening.
conversations. Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
And that last degree of any sign is very powerful. And when Mars is in the last degree of a sign, it can be extra spicy. So in the last degree of its own sign,
super spicy. It's like the ghost pepper of Mars.
I love it. Yeah, there you go. Perfect. So that could apply to the chili that you bring to the barbecue too.
Yes,
Go easy on the spices.
Yes.
I wanted to tell you, Mel, like one stupid story. Like this is a funny one, I think, but I on the Venus-Uranus conjunction not too long ago, I had this hankering for this chicken sandwich that I'd been eyeing that had just returned to my favorite restaurant. And it's called the Jerk. Basically, it's this spicy Caribbean jerk chicken sandwich. And I was like, I'm getting that. And with our sensitive Cancerian stomachs, it was way more than I bargained for. It was delicious, but it was like, oh boy, that's way more than we bargained for. So you may get more than you bargained for with Mars here. And that could be way more dangerous than getting way more than you bargained for with a Venus-Uranus conjunction. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's It seemed like a good idea under 29 degrees Aries.
Yeah,
but it got to 0 degrees Taurus, and you're like, wait a second, this don't feel right.
Yes.
This isn't comfortable. Yeah. So, Mercury's gonna chill out a little bit. It's gonna chill out. It's not, because, like you said, it's still moving fast speeds. It's
really fast,
really fast speeds. But it is in. Mercury in Cancer, it does. Don't you have Mercury? You have Mercury in Cancer.
I do,
don't
yeah.
you? Yeah.
22 Cancer retrograde.
That moon-backed Mercury, because we got to realize any planet that's in Cancer, it's got a moon backing. It's got those ups and downs. It's we're back to the ebb and flow and the fluctuation.
Absolutely.
So there's Mercury in Cancer can be a little subjective because of that, because it has that moon bias that goes behind it. So
a little, especially with you get a tornado 10 miles south of you, subjectively the world is coming to an end.
It's ending. This is it.
So take a little bit of what I say today with a grain of salt, but also I think there is some objective truth in there also. But yes, my Mercury is definitely emotionally impacted when I'm feeling strong emotions. I'll own it.
And intuitively impacted too, because that's the thing. It's like the feelings and the emotions come in, but so do the knowings that you can't necessarily explain. You just feel.
Yeah. And it's not just my own experience. It's observing, an increase in the collective kind of things right now too. So as Cancers, I do think we are not uniquely, but we are tapped in strongly into the collective vibe, the zeitgeist. You know what I'm saying? I feel like we feel the currents. That's the one thing about the crab. It's a very sensitive creature because it's a prey animal, and there's all sorts of threats that want to eat it, on the shore. So it has to be able to be aware of danger at every turn. So there's some sensitivity to those things in the collective, like, ooh, that feels off to me. And and those things are just getting louder to my little Cancerian antennas lately. So take that what you will from that.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about Mars and Taurus, because this is big news. I mean, it's really the last sign before it makes it stop to Gemini, which is going to be forever.
Right.
But while
Right.
Mars is in Taurus, it is kicking up some dust. It is like,
Mhm.
it's like, I am going to rock your Taurian world. You know, what do the eclipses look like for you? Well,
Oh
let me
boy.
activate them.
Yeah.
So, you know, Mars in Taurus is considered a place of its detriment
Right.
because of the opposition from its placement of where it's in domicile and Mars in Scorpio. So it's one of those places where Mars loses its most dignity right away, right? You know,
Yeah.
it's moving from this, it's blazing along in Aries. It's like, I'm living the hot life. And then all of a sudden it gets into Taurus. It's like, excuse me? You want to slow down? You want to, you know, it's
It
not that
disrupts.
energy.
Yeah, it disrupts our routines. I think
Mm,
that Taurus in general is a fixed earth sign. They want things predictable. You know, whenever something's moving through Taurus, like, oh, I want to stabilize this. I want to enjoy the Venusian delights. And Mars is here taking a machete to those things, to your routines, to the material resources, and saying, oh, you're comfortable? Well, sorry. One day you're not going to have any energy. Some other day you're going to want to do everything all at once. So the challenge with Mars and Taurus is how can you find the ability to pace yourself correctly, you
mm.
know, because that, especially when it's matching up to with Uranus later on, is our routines are going to get shaken up by something. And how can you try to find the routine that will work for you and get, maybe even the positive thing is this could bust us out of a rut that we may have been experiencing
Yeah,
as it, you know.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I feel like that is a big that is a big signature of what Mars's whole journey in Taurus is, as a, you know, because essentially kind of what uh, Spencer and I are alluding to, of like what Mars is doing here is like, first it's going to activate the eclipse degree, but
Mm.
the late July, early August, it's going to make a conjunction with Uranus in the North Node all at the same time.
Yeah.
And that's an incredibly disruptive signature. You know, we were talking about our apprehension with Mars and Pluto earlier. Well, you know, bring
Yeah.
Mars, Uranus, and throw in the North Node there. You know,
Funky.
we're cooking with some serious gas here.
Yep.
But I love looking at the idea of, you know, what's been stuck in the, because this is a really dislodging, right? You know,
Yeah.
Mars will, and Uranus together, it's going to violently disrupt in the service of, you know, evolution or what needs to be experienced with that North Node there. Something's been dislodged already, right? Because we've had the solar eclipse there, we had a lunar eclipse, at least, you know, activating the solar side of things. And so it's, you know, I liked when I had Jared on for Gemini season,
Nice.
and he was talking about how Venus, when Venus got into Taurus, and she, you know, normally she'd be like, I'm home, I'm back, and she's like, he was saying like, it's like coming back home and you realized your kid had like a crazy party, and like
Yeah.
everything, you know, the eclipse had this crazy
Yeah.
party, and all of a sudden you have this totally disrupted sanctuary. And it's like, to me, it's like that was experienced there, and then Mars is going to come along and be like, okay, now we are fully dismantling
Yep.
this place. But if you're stuck, this could be the best thing that ever happened to you. And sometimes like the things that are like get us out of our comfort zones, even though it's really disruptive and we might cling to it at first, like how many times are people like, it was really the best thing that ever happened to me. I needed to warm up to it, but like I really needed that change. And it's not as crazy, you know, 5 years down the line, because you're like, if that hadn't happened, then I wouldn't have done this, and I would have done that, and I would have done that.
Well,
And to me, it kind
my
of has that.
subjective Mercury is also being like, pray for me because my moon is right within 3 degrees
I'll
of
pray.
this
Well,
Mars Uranus like conjunction.
it's
Like,
on my ascendant
yeah,
descendant.
yeah.
So I feel you. I'm like, do pray for me. Absolutely.
At the end of the day, like my Taurus moon's just like, no change, no thanks. Like I'll just do what I've been doing. That'd be fine. No, but you're right. Like sometimes we don't know what has been a weight that we've been carrying for so long. We just get used to it. And this is the Taurus way. My dad's a Taurus rising, and he could endure all sorts of challenging, painful things and just go about it with a smile. And it's like, why are you putting up with that? And I sort of inherited a little bit of that from him. And there's times when you realize when that weight is finally lifted, you're like, oh my God, I've been carrying that burden for so long of this, just because that was what I was used to. And that's where it's good to get things shaken up. I mean, we talk about detriment and being in domicile, exaltation, but ultimately all of this is if you believe in, the cosmic unity, all of this is part of a divine plan. And each of these planets in the different signs has its role to play. So we do need sometimes to get shaken up from the routines. We do need to reevaluate what we consider security and how we support ourselves, and be motivated enough, maybe by challenges, to do something different than we've normally done in the past.
Absolutely. It's it's essentially at least the combo that's coming, it's catalytic energy,
Yeah.
and the catalyst leads us somewhere else. Like we need that, because Mars is starting the fire wherever it goes. It's always starting the fire,
Yeah.
but it's starting a fire under something that is very set, very rooted in, but not so much, because we've already had shakeups in this area. So but also why it can be so like dramatic in what it actually ends up creating, just because it's not like a full-on explosion of like this just changes like this and it's like this. It's like this slow thing that's been building, but when it happens, it's going to be significant, it's going to be lasting. And so
That's a good point. These things don't happen in a vacuum. There has been lead ups to all of these events, right?
Yeah, so many lead ups.
Uranus always never fails to actually surprise me.
It'll throw something in. It'll
Yeah.
it's like you knew this was coming, but like this aspect of it, or the timing, or something, or who's involved, et cetera. It'll always give you some sort of thing. But like the overall arching thing, picture of it won't be that much of a surprise, but it doesn't mean it's not disruptive or ask you to change.
I guess some of my advice with this, in addition to my cautious Cancerian side, is be frugal with your resources around this period of time.
Yes, I agree.
I think that because we're going to get the Mars Uranus conjunction with the North Node, and then Mars is going to square Saturn. So when it's moving through a sign that is related to the abundance that supports us, like with fertility of the earth, maybe it's something related to that, where we are separated from the things that are supporting us, and that can lead to feelings of lack and scarcity and things like that. And it doesn't have to be as big of a tragedy if you're prepared, and if you've been setting healthy limitations to your expenditures and preparing a little bit better for that. It doesn't mean you have to become some crazy Montana prepper or something like that, but just, like I said, like having a good emergency kit, like maybe paring down the discretionary spending and saying, well, we're going to put some extra aside if something happens. Those little things can really add up and make times like this help with your resiliency. I think that's the word I would put, is it'll help you become more resilient when we face some of these inevitable challenges that we probably most likely will go through. Yeah,
absolutely. Be conscious with your resources.
Economy, right?
Yeah, because this is a thing. This is a thing right now, and I think Mars will be very disruptive in what we take for granted.
Well, inflation is real, and the interest rates keep climbing, and the price of things keeps climbing, and global conflicts have an effect on markets and the resources that we can and cannot acquire. So there may be some difficult to predict event that may make it more challenging to get some of the things that we're used to or that we took for granted.
Yeah, yeah, when we think about just what those things, the value of those things, we think about Mars as the one that takes.
Yeah. Separates us
So,
from things.
and so it'll take us away from it, or it'll take our money. So you
Right.
want this? Well, it's going to
Yep.
take a lot of money
Yeah.
to get that stable. So just be,
George Harrison told us all about it. It's gonna take time. It's gonna take a whole
take a
lot of
whole lot of precious
precious.
time.
Yeah. It's
Gonna take plenty of time to do
to
it,
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 do it,
to do
to
it,
do
to
it,
do
to
it,
do
to
it, to
do
do
it
it
right
right.
now.
I got my
My mind set
mindset
on
on.
you. Yeah, I used to love that song. That was like
That's
one
a
of my
great
favorite
song.
songs when I
Oh,
was a
so
kid.
good.
Yeah,
So
all
good.
right.
But
See,
he also is,
Cancer's going
yep,
down
there you
the
go.
nostalgia.
But he's also like, it's going to take money, a whole lot of precious money.
Whole lot of precious money. It's
Right.
gonna take plenty of money.
Yep. Exactly.
Oh, that's funny. All right, we got to move on with this forecast. We're
Yeah,
going to
let's
be
do
like
it.
3 hours in. Um,
Karaoke hour
yeah,
is
the
coming
karaoke
to a
hour has
close.
begun.
You can't, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here,
You would think we're drinking, but we're not.
No.
So, all right.
It's
Well,
the
we're
sun,
at the
it's the
point.
sun Neptune drunkenness.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right.
square.
We're sun
There
square
you go.
Neptuning right now. But all right, so basically at this point, once these ingresses are made with Mars and Mercury, we are at a first quarter moon in Libra. So the lunar cycle itself is kicking off in Libra territory, which we always know is very social and relatedness to relationships and just relations to everyone, to justice system situations. These are types of things that could come up with Libra. So there is that's going to kick off. And a couple days after that, we have the sun making a square to Chiron. And as we speak right now, Mars is conjunct Chiron, but there's going to be a sun square Chiron, and then Mercury is also going to square Jupiter that same day. So there's a little bit of a interesting
For our birthdays.
Oh, well, that's
Like,
great.
I'll be built into our solar
Nice
returns.
charts. I know. I think I wrote this down earlier, and I was like,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, Mercury is my time lord next year too. Yeah, Mercury
I get-
square Jupiter. It could be worse. I mean,
Fun me. I've had Saturn as my time lord for last year, and Saturn will be my time lord.
oh, you're in the double
Again.
Saturns. Yeah,
Yep.
I've been there. Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah.
But so it's interesting. So like I'm gonna kind of put all these days together in some respects. So we have July 8th is Mercury squaring Jupiter and the sun squaring Chiron, but the sun is doing this kind of back-to-back thing where it squares Chiron, but then it's going to go on to sextile Uranus and the North Node from the 10th through the 12th. So the sun's kind of making its own journey where it gets a little triggered by this kind of Chiron action, but then it's making a supportive sextile to Uranus and the North Node, which I like those things. And they could be some precursors to what Mars will be doing later. But Mercury and Jupiter are getting together. That speaks to me as more inflation on goods and things like that, because here's my theory. It's like, we already obviously saw the inflation in the Aries ingress with Mercury conjunct Jupiter, Mercury not in a good state, Jupiter really strong. And I feel like there's just going to be this build of inflation, at least until Jupiter goes retrograde at the end of July. Not to say that will totally end then by any means, but I think the climb of just things continuing to balloon and inflate.
Well, and look at Jupiter's host now in its exile instead of in its home, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So it's
in
not
the sign of resources. So.
in the sign of resources.
Yeah.
So to me, this speaks of just things kind of getting out of control with prices and transactions, and we're looking for some relief, to some extent. That's the way I see it. Not to say that the relief will necessarily come when Jupiter goes retrograde, but I think maybe it'll take some of that pressure off. But but that's just my theory in this current state. It still has repercussions, of course, for the whole economic system.
Yeah.
But we can only go to the store so many times and it goes up like 40 cents every time we see it. Like there will have to eventually be some sort of capping, I think. But I think this moment is not one of those times. I think we're going to see more. But we could also see very verbal, outrage about this too, or perhaps Jupiterian figures speaking out on what's happening, because people are trying to find solutions, and people are like, do something, and you're like, but if I do this, it's going to do this, and it's once again we're to this catalytic chain reaction of,
well, Mercury is hanging out similar to the degree of the new moon, so it may
that's true,
be reflecting similar themes that we saw with the sun moon square to Jupiter, but just now it's more of a discussion rather than an awareness, because Mercury is involved with that. So
yeah,
all these cycles are connected, right? All these meta cycles, and it may bring a similar theme to a different area of your life as well, because let's say the new moon lit up your, I don't know, your sixth house or something like that, but then Mercury rules a different house in your chart, so you may feel it in a slightly different area of your chart, but with similar themes.
Yeah, it definitely does seem like there's some tying in there. Finally the word comes around, or the information, or the perception of it, or the talk of it, etc. So I feel like something's kicking up there. The sun sextile Uranus in the North Node, just that adds a little. I feel like that is like, let me get clever here. Like, how do I, you know what I mean? Like, this is the point where it's like, well, what can I do? How can I preserve myself? How can I preserve my family, my resources, my safety, my security? Like, if what I do doesn't normally work, or what I do, I can't,
totally, that because that second
obtain,
yeah, that second 10 degrees of Cancer, Austin Coppock calls the walled garden. So it's all about being able to protect something vulnerable and valuable so that you can nurture it to fruition. So yeah, we might be putting up the shields and saying, let's hunker down. Like maybe we don't go on that expensive vacation this summer and spend a bunch of money in gas. Maybe gas prices are crazy or something. But see, here's the thing, like, you don't have to go on a super expensive long distance vacation to connect with people, to relax. And maybe that's where the innovation comes in. Maybe you can do something more local that requires less travel, less budget. Maybe you can do a staycation, or go to your local, I don't know, pond or beach or something, but depending on if you live near stuff like that. But there's ways but it's going to test your ability to innovate. But like I said, sometimes some of the most beautiful experiences I've had haven't been these like big extravagant things. They've been just quiet moments, with at home with family and things like that. So it might be time to lean into things like that.
Yeah, it's like I feel like if there's two signs that can appreciate the simple things in life, Cancer and Taurus are definitely up there. Virgo as well. But like these, it's like, look for those things that bring you, joy and excitement.
Well, I'm a Cancer sun with a Taurus moon, so you're speaking
there you go.
Right
So on the same time, just about on July 12th, we have Mercury's going to square Chiron then. So, Mercury's coming around, because as once again, Mercury is basically shadowing all the moves that the sun makes. And so there can be some triggering action there. But Venus also trines Saturn, who is retrograde, as we know, on the 12th of July there, which is a Tuesday. And so this is interesting because, Venus and Saturn have had a very complex relationship ever since her conjunction, where she's like sandwiched with Mars, and, and she just went through a square right before the Cancer season began. And so, here she is, and she's like, I'm cooperating with you. We're going to work. We're going to flow together. We're going to work together. And
Well, and
so,
maybe this is
yeah.
the therapy session that you go through after the problem argument has come up,
Yeah.
right? The reunifying kind of like sober discussions that are very idealistic and rational, but based on the reality of your situation now rather than the illusions. So I think it could be pretty productive and fruitful. It could be committing to a new ideological set of values in your relationships or in our societies or whatnot. So those types of things, it's like the binding um, action of Saturn coming together with the unifying and harmonizing quality of Venus.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can really imagine like people bonding over like mind, maybe they have a
Yeah.
cause that they want to speak out together, and they're unifying their purpose or goal, etc. Um, it also seems very strategic, just as far as relationships are concerned. Talking about what your plans might be, or your outlook, or what, even if it's your uh, what's the my brain, it's getting late.
Mushy. Yeah, the mushy
The
brain
brain is
time.
getting mushy.
Yeah.
I didn't want to say your escape plan, but
Well, yeah.
what you were just telling people to prepare for themselves.
Emergency preparedness plan, right?
Yes,
Yes.
yes. And so thinking about those
Yeah.
kind of like necessary, need coming together, like having those talks.
Yeah, and in conjunction with the trine between Saturn and Venus, the sun's moved into the third area of Cancer, which is related to themes of scarcity versus luxury. So like the recognition of somebody getting more is taking away from somebody who is receiving less. There's also that Four of Cups energy with that decan, where you have the figure that's sitting under the tree refusing the extra hand of the divine. And it's kind of the the transition I see in Cancer with that T. Susan Chang really points out is you desire something in the first decan, you get it satiated in that second decan, you celebrate with abundance, and then the third decan you're kind of like, all right, I'm well fed, or I feel the lack, and now I'm just bored with this. Or like, it's like, what's next? It's kind of like the refusing something that's being offered to you, and saying, I'm not feeling this anymore. How do I get prepared for the next cycle that is inspiring?
Yeah. And it's interesting because it's like the card of luxury,
Right.
technically, moon in Cancer, and but it's so full in a sense, it kind of has like that third quarter phase. It's like, it's so full that it doesn't, it doesn't satiate anymore, or there's complacency that happens.
And the moon is waxing towards fullness in Capricorn, so
exactly,
which is not its favorite place. Like,
don't I know?
I know you do.
Yeah, so we are basically leading up to a full moon on July 13th, which is a Wednesday, in Capricorn. And so this is always this is the buck moon, the buck full moon, I think, or I think it's also the thunder moon.
It's the rutting moon.
It's the moon that always it's the sobering moon. But it's interesting to think of Venus, who is coming up a trine with the ruler of the full moon, Saturn, at that same time. So there is, because full moons, these are very interpersonal lunations, because it's the oppositions kind of are the I and the other. There's like, we're confronted with something outside of ourselves. So to have Venus kind of in, and this is Saturn's aspect to some degree. It's an interesting configuration. I think it kind of helps it, honestly. Because at first glance, we look at the moon at 21 degrees of Capricorn, and we're like, oh, you're a little close to Pluto. You're a little close. You're a little too
Danger
close
zone
to Pluto. But also, there's a trine that happens right before this, that trine to Uranus. And then there is a sextile to Neptune before there is the conjunction to Pluto. So it's not like the moon immediately goes straight to Pluto, because if that was the case, I'd be like, ooh, I don't know, but there is some tempering with that Neptune, maybe just well, I don't know about tempering, but it's not like pure Pluto right away. There seems to be this diffusive force that is in there too. And Mercury also sextiling Uranus at that time. So the moon is lighting up this Mercury Uranus configuration before it makes the full moon, which does seem a little excitable.
Yeah,
To some extent.
here's what I would say with this one. This reminds me of the time during the pandemic where people started hoarding toilet paper. I'm serious. This is like a similar aspect to with the moon in Capricorn 3, which is related to Hesed, but hoarding this Hesed is this energy in the Kabbalistic tree of life that is about the flow, the limitlessness, the abundance. And in this third decan of Capricorn, you see a figure in the Four of Pentacles that is holding on to everything so tightly, like all its material resources, and saying, oh, I need more, I need this, like King Midas, right? And, you know, because we may be experiencing inflation or some challenges with resources, the flip side of that is we feel like we have to go, like, you know, get hours and stack up on toilet paper or whatever it is that we feel is we'd be lacking, which can lead to even a bigger exacerbation of the problem, because, you know, instead of sharing with others, we're trying to, you know,
clogging up the system.
Exactly. So that would be my main warning and advice with that, is that even if you feel like there's some scary things happening, it's important not to overdo the preparedness type of exercises as well, if what it is doing is actually making the problem worse rather than better.
Yeah, it's interesting when we think about the concept of taking what you need,
Right.
because taking what you need results or relies on having trust that when you need again, you'll have the resource.
Yeah.
And not everybody, you know, like that's the irony too, is like, I remember the toilet paper situation went down. Maybe I was late on the game. I don't know. I did not hoard. I did not have the things that I needed.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, the friends that came out of the woodwork, give me a roll of toilet paper,
Right.
to like the sharing and the like.
Exactly.
I had friends dropping me off a roll.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It was great. It was connective. Like I had trust in the flow of the universe to provide what I needed when I needed.
Well, those extreme situations can bring out the worst, but also the best in people. So
Exactly.
you get to choose how you react to these circumstances. You don't always get to choose the circumstances, but you get to choose what kind of character you're going to display when the crisis situation may hit. And, you know, it's like Mr. Rogers would say, there's that quote where he's like, look for the helpers, right? Someone was asking him, how do we deal with these tragedies in the world? And it's look for the helpers, look for the people that are really, you know, digging deep into their sense of integrity and trying to be the best they can be in that moment. And the best you can be in that moment may be different than the best you can be in a moment that's not so intense, but at least the attempts to be a communal kindness. Like that's one word that I wrote down in my notes. Liz Green talks about an energy of let's see, what was it? Divine kindness, like a divine Cancer representing let's see. Sorry. I just thought this was a divine climate of kindness, right? And that's why like the Mars or Saturn in Cancer is like, they're not like into that kind of thing. Like, so, and the moon Capricorn is not the divine climate of kindness. It's more so related to cold, hard reality. So that's why there's some discomfort there. When the moon that is normally most at home in a divine climate of kindness and nurturing is in the sign of cold, hard reality, there's just a little bit of a disconnect. So how can you try to return to that kindness even when everyone else may be not pursuing that?
Yeah, it's an interesting space because it does deal with power dynamics, and
Yeah.
we're probably going to see a lot of political, corporations, systematic stuff coming to the news or coming to blossoming to forefront. But it also, that's the issue with the axis of Cancer and Capricorn, is it's the idea of the unconditional and the conditional. And the moon in Capricorn can definitely nurture through condition, rather than need. But I think that what the point that you're bringing up is really interesting, Spencer, because pretty much what happens right after this full moon is we have this kind of unique configuration when we talk about the kindness that you were just talking about, where Venus is going to be squaring Neptune. Basically, Venus squares Neptune on the full moon, or like not too long after it.
Right.
But in the days coming on the 16th and the 17th, that is when Mercury is going to have its cazimi with the sun. But also it just happens to trine Neptune at the same time.
Nice.
So here we have that, like if the carrying energy, and the moon's going to be in Pisces too. So maybe if there is hardness during the Capricorn moon, I think a couple days later, by the time we get to the weekend of July 16th and the 17th, we do have a softening position to some extent, at least interpersonally, and like being able to connect with the Neptune energies and maybe like a softer, kinder, more compassionate spirit for ourselves. It's going to be very activating for the US, just because the US has its Mercury basically on the cazimi itself. So that's
crazy.
It is crazy. So this whole Mercury cycle, not even just this cazimi, this Mercury cycle that it's embedded in, is very tied up with mercurial stuff for the US.
Well, I'll be talking Cancer decans on that day, on the Mercury
Oh, well,
cazimi.
look at you! How perfect! So
I even
Mercury
pushed it back.
cazimi.
I even pushed it back a week as far as when I normally do it, because I was like, oh, that looks like a much better day to do it on. So.
Oh yeah, you're gonna be tapped in. You're gonna be tapped into that Cancer zone.
Right.
So definitely go sign up. Go sit. If there's any day to kind of zone out and listen to Cancer speak.
There you go.
Because that's the thing, is we might just want to kind of just immerse ourselves and just hanging out and taking some space. Maybe the last couple of days were intense. Maybe life has been intense. And you just need to turn off your brain for a second, or just watch a movie, or go to the beach. Or I bet the beaches are going to be packed on July 16th. Maybe don't go to the beach. Maybe sit in your tub. It depends on how much you want to navigate crowds, but
well, and that's something else that we might be dealing with around these summer months, is just the heat waves. Like that's something that it was 100 degrees here in Michigan today. So that's another reason I'm probably like cranky today, because I live on the second floor of a 2-unit place, and it's a lot of it's a lot of heat, and
I'm a cool 70 degrees.
There you go. Well,
good old California. Yeah. And why I pay so much to live here.
All right. My cat has wandered in and is making an appearance. So
my cat just walked by. The cats are like, you guys have been talking for a while. What's going on here?
Yeah.
So any take on that the superior cazimi that we haven't quite shared yet before we move on?
I mean, so you're spot on pointing out the trine with Neptune. So that square that we experienced earlier, now maybe we've got a more harmonious relationship with the way that we're seeing the world and the illusions that we have around our thought processes. This is also a place where we're seeing an applying opposition to Pluto too.
Yes.
So this is there's something pretty intense that is going to come out of this as well. So again, that decan really highlights the haves and the have-nots. And I think that this could be really something that's in the conversation universally is, well, why do these people get to, have abundance and these while everyone else suffers, type of thing. I think there could be some really big picture conversations that happen around those specific issues.
Yeah, I could see that with Neptune being in the mix.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
The other thing I'll say too, sorry, this
mhm.
is another stream of consciousness thought, with the applying opposition with the sun and Pluto too. I remember this from 2 years ago. The Sun Pluto opposition was happening when we were having protests happening in Portland, and they were bringing unmarked vans around and basically kidnapping and detaining protesters and taking them to like these undisclosed locations. So Pluto in myth erupts from the underworld to abduct Persephone and bring her back to the underworld. So there may be some themes like that as well, with like abuse of power or abductions or things like that. Like, I hope not, but it may be an intense social time where we're coming face to face with power and how power can be used in a corrupt way as well.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, there's already been, I mean, just talks right now about the police force and how fast they're moving with children. We think about
Yeah.
cancer and stuff like that. It could be more about that talk or
Yeah.
changes there. And but even the social dynamic, because right before this happens, Venus was squaring Neptune. Venus still in a very vocal Gemini space, now backed by Mercury, who is having a cazimi with the sun. So she could, be on her own mission of sorts there. But absolutely, I feel like there is just that meeting with the sun. And then the next thing Mercury does is oppose Pluto. Well, I
Yep.
mean, meeting with the sun, trine Neptune, and then it goes to oppose Pluto. There's like, whether that's something outside yourself or just stark realizations within yourself that like
Yeah.
kind of change your perception or change your plan or your etc. It does seem like definitely a shift is taking place, which then that same day, essentially on the 17th, we have Venus moving into Cancer. So, now she's part of the Cancerian party. Oh, my cat's in the background.
Yeah, I know.
We just got cats. We got cats lurking.
Well, this is the forbidden room with all the like poisonous plants. That's why I gotta keep an eye on them.
Oh, Kitty.
But
Does Kitty need to go?
I
need to
usually
shut the
don't have
door?
I usually don't have the door open, but since it's so hot
So
in
hot.
here, I have to keep them.
Oh. we hear Kitty. Yeah. There's some trouble is getting stirred up.
Yeah. I have this
Well,
funny video that I took of them a long time ago that I posted in slow motion on my Instagram of them jumping over the fan in my doorway and knocking it over, and the other one going scurrying in the other direction. I feel like that moment is coming again soon.
Coming again soon.
Like,
well, we got to wrap up these
we're
last
almost
few
done
things here anyway. So basically, we have a couple things happening at the end of Cancer season here. That's Venus moving into Cancer on the 17th. Then we have Mercury and the Sun in Cancer both oppose Pluto on the 18th, 19th, which we just talked about.
Right.
And so that's like a Monday and a Tuesday. And then Mercury ingresses into Leo right when Chiron stations retrograde 2 on the 19th. So we have a couple ingresses that are essentially taking place and kind of like this wounded triggery signature with Chiron station if you follow Chiron, because whenever a planet stations, it becomes pretty prominent. The moon's also going over it around the same time. So here we have this Aries moon kind of lighting up this space.
Activating it. Yeah.
Yeah. So there definitely does seem to be, because this is leading us into on the 20th, there's a last quarter moon in Aries at 27 degrees Aries right before Leo season begins. And a last quarter in Aries to me has a little bit of a desperation
Yeah.
signature to it. It has like there is a strong activation point there, and especially with Chiron stationing and the moon going over it to go to last quarter. There could be the 19th and the 20th could be a little crunchy just far as
And it's T squaring that Pluto opposition.
yeah, exactly. So Mercury already moved on by the time it really does the T square, but no, it doesn't. The sun Pluto. Yeah.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
the 19th, 20th in particular, because that's the exact earlier in the morning. Yeah, that's highlighting these power dynamics, and it's highlighting a lot of the Aries action that we started out this season with, and those tensions with the cardinal energies and the home, the family, the independent initiative, the power in the systems. This is a crunch that's happening right before we go into Leo season, which it happens to be at the exact same time. We have Mars here at 10 degrees of Taurus, and this is also the activation point of the eclipse. This is something that, so you can bet the week of the 18th, the 19th, and the 20th are pretty dynamic days in the sky, collectively and personally in your own life, and whatever the eclipse story is for you, how these cardinal placements are taking place. So it's a lot. I know. This is like Gray and I made a joke in the last program where we saw a chart that was pretty like a little difficult, and we both had nothing to say, and I was like, I feel like this aspect needs a moment of silence.
Yeah. No, sometimes that's all you can do. And there's wisdom in that, though, because then that quiets the mind, and sometimes when you get centered again, when you're facing something challenging, you make a better decision in that moment. And I think that's really good advice for this period of time, is just try to stay as centered as you can. Be vigilant. You're asking me about what my one word could be. I think that's probably my one word.
The
Vigilance. Which is not necessarily just surrendering to fear. Vigilance is keeping both of your feet on the ground, paying attention to your surroundings like a sensitive crab would, and being prepared. So it's not getting complacent. It's the opposite of complacency. And that's something I think we can all strive for, without making it into this like, oh my God, this terrible thing's going to happen. It's like, no, it's just like, okay, I've got my plan. I'm going to go about my business, but I've got my plan. If it happens, then I can be cool under fire, rather than just, being in a place where I'm not prepared. And then you run around like a chicken with your head cut off, or like Mars on Algol that we're going to see later on. When it squares Saturn, right? So that is the key. That's how you can avoid the worst of Algol, I think, too, is preparedness and keeping your wits about you, and channeling that passion into the right direction. Creativity, maybe, or preparedness. Look at what Perseus had when he had to face the Gorgon. He had this beautiful shield. He had these winged sandals. He was prepared. He had like his bug out bag, when he had to go when he had to go acquire the head of Medusa to rescue the princess Andromeda from the sea creature, the Kraken.
The Kraken.
All I can think of is Harry Hamlin in that 80s.
Oh, that's the best one.
Clash of the Titans, right?
Yeah, he's my favorite. I love that one. That's a great movie. All right, vigilance. I'm trying to think of what my word would be. I'm like, my brain is like, my brain says fog. It says fog.
There's a lot of Neptune stuff. So
there's a lot of Neptune stuff. Fog. Well, it's interesting. If I even compare that with what you're saying, it's like there's staying vigilant through the fog. Like if we don't know exactly how things are going to turn out, or if there's uncertainty that we're dealing with, the best thing we can is be prepared for any outcome,
That's
you
right.
know,
That's right.
or be flexible with any outcome. So maybe the word is fog. But
Yeah.
that could be very personal to this moment I'm experiencing right now, or that could have to do with everything that we've been talking
No,
about.
flexibility is great too, because that allows us to respond in the way that is necessary for that moment. So instead of preconceiving what a moment should be when we're completely present, then we can respond to what that moment is asking of us, rather than, you know, reacting in a way that we wish it was happening, or reacting in a way where we're afraid of what could happen. You know, it's more about just saying, okay, I'm prepared, but I'm still staying present in the moment. And I think gratitude, again, is really another word I would really put out there. When you're facing scarcity, the way that you can, this is something that I learned from, I love Susie Chang, man, her and MM Milan, they're so good. But they talked about the fives, which are difficult cards in the tarot, right? They're all related to the Sephira Gavura, or Gabura. I don't know how it's pronounced exactly, but
I think it's a little of both.
yeah. And she talks about the remedy to all of those is coming back to the Three of Cups and abundance and gratitude, and just being grateful for what we have. And that can make up for so many things, so much lack that we may perceive. This is going to be a test of our perception. Like, how are we perceiving things? Are we basing things on a past that no longer exists anymore? Or are we basing our expectations on a future that may not be the future that we actually have? And how do we live with the moment that we actually are living and find peace within that, rather than, you know, discomfort?
Yeah. And that's difficult when Mars
It's
moving
hard.
through the first decan of Taurus.
Yeah.
You know, so but you know, that's the challenge that we're in. And
right.
we're all gonna get through it. That's the
That's
thing.
true.
It's like we're all gonna make it. At
Well,
least I hope
and your
so.
friendly astrologers are here to guide you through it if you need
We
some
are.
help
If you
too.
need some guidance, or if you need a pep talk, you know, I'm
Yeah.
great at pep talks. So it's
Yes.
part guidance,
That's
part
right.
astrological guidance, part Mel pep talk.
That's right.
I'm like, you know, that's what I'm here for. So, all right, Spencer, well, it was great chatting
Yeah, it's fun.
Cancer season with you, all things Cancer to Cancer.
Yeah.
So where can people find you? We know we know what you're going on, what you got going
Yeah.
on. So where are you
Yeah.
living on the webs?
So you can find me at spencermichaud.com, MICHAUD.com. And that has all my, links to booking readings or classes or tutoring. I do astrological tutoring as well. I have a YouTube channel, Spencer Michaud Astrology, that I do live streams for the new and the full moon, and I do a monthly also on that channel. So you can join me for live streams with a nice conversation with a really international community that's been stopping by. It's really a lot of fun having those talks. And then I'm active on Instagram. I have a Twitter at Spencer Michaud, and Instagram is the same handle. But I post astrologically significant announcements, but mostly pictures of cats and interesting animal stuff in my stories and funny things. I try to keep it fairly light on my Instagram. Hopefully, it's a little bit of a virtual hug for people on some level.
Which we're all going to need.
Sorry for the virtual slap in the face today. It wasn't intentional, but looking at the astrology,
It's a duty to say.
Yes.
So remind us of the day again and the time of the Cancer.
So the Decans
workshop.
of Cancer webinar /workshop is going to be July 16th on the Mercury Cazimi at 1 p.m. Eastern time, which is a Saturday. You can also sign up for the Summer Decans bundle, which is Cancer, Leo, and Virgo, on my website as well, where you get an extra discount if you sign up for all three. And of course, you can use Mel's code EP20.
EP20
for 20% off, right? So yeah,
that's right. So you're going to want to use that code. And of course, I'll share all of Spencer's information over at my webpage at energeticprinciples.com and remind you of the code in case you need it there. but yeah, so you can come find me over there where if you like and want to support the program and my astrological efforts, you can book a consultation. I also have my monthly newsletter, The Heavenly Wind, you can sign up for if you would like some astrology straight to your inbox in a nice, somewhat concise form. What else do I got going on? I have some things I'm cooking up with Christina Caudill that we're gonna let you know more of on the solstice, but I can't say right now.
Nice.
So I'm gonna leave you hanging. Yeah, so stay tuned for that. What else? What else? What else? Well, if you liked what you heard here today, or felt that it was information worthy to share with a friend, sharing is caring, spread the good word, share the podcast with others. Or if you can leave a review wherever you're listening to this, that will help the podcast be seen further. And yeah, I think that's it. That's all. We've said so much. What else is there to say? So, all right, Spencer. Well, it's always a pleasure getting to chat with you. You're welcome back anytime.
Oh, thank you, Mel. The pleasure is all mine. I really enjoy chatting with you and working with you. So thank you so much for having me here.
Absolutely. And thank you all for tuning in with us for another long broadcast. We hope you got value from our forecast for the month ahead. And we wish you the best of luck during Cancer season. And as always, may the stars be with you.